The agenda was issued last Wednesday and hard copies were issued to people as well. The meeting is being live streamed and recorded. A video recording will be posted online shortly after the meeting on the Council's YouTube channel. I will introduce short breaks at appropriate stages in the meeting and may vary the order of business to best manage the business conducted. Given the business before the Council, it's likely, well, we might break for lunch, we'll see, but maybe for expeditious we can get through it. If members who are attending remotely wish to speak, they should use the raise hand icon on screen, and I will ask if all who wish to speak have done so before closing the debate. But at that point, it's their responsibility to ensure they attract my attention, even by cutting in verbally. Otherwise, they may miss their chance to speak. And those who are attending remotely should ensure their cameras are switched on at all times, and everyone should make sure their mobile phone is on silent. This is effectively a budget meeting, so that's why there's no information bulletin or volume of minutes. Mr. Moody will now take the sederant.
Thank you, Provost. Provost Bissett.
Present.
Deputy Provost Balfour.
Present.
Councillor Aitchison.
Here.
Councillor Anslow.
Present.
Councillor Binney.
Present.
Councillor Bowes.
Present.
Councillor Brown.
Councillor Brown is she's trying to connect. I think she's had some problems just with getting the link, so hopefully she's
Thanks, Councillor.
Get things sorted out.
We'll come back to Councillor Brown at the end. Councillor Buchanan.
Yeah.
Councillor Bundy.
Present.
Councillor Colley.
Present.
Councillor Deacon.
Present.
Councillor Devine.
Present.
Councillor Flynn. Councillor Forrest.
Present.
Councillor Garner.
Present.
Councillor Hannah.
Present.
Councillor Kelly.
Present.
Councillor Kerr.
Yep.
Councillor McCabe.
Yep.
Councillor Meiklejohn.
Present.
Councillor Murtagh.
And shot.
Councillor Nimmo.
Present.
Councillor Patterson.
Present.
Councillor Patrick.
Present.
Councillor Redmond.
Present.
Councillor Ritchie.
Present.
Apologies have been submitted on behalf of Councillor Robertson, Councillor Sinclair,
Present.
Councillor Spears, Councillor Steinbank,
Present.
and just checking to see if Councillor Brown has been able to join. It doesn't appear yet. Thank you.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks, Mr. Moody. Second item on the agenda is declarations of interest. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of interest. Do we have any declarations of interest? No, thank you. Next item is agenda item 3, housing revenue account and council house rents, pages 3 to 15. Mr. Gillespie, I believe, will summarise the report. Mr. Gillespie.
Thank you, Provost. First, I would like to take the opportunity to thank Danny Cairn and his team, and also Natalie Moore-Young and her team for the hard work throughout the year, and especially pulling together the rent and the housing investment report, which will follow after the rent report. And also to thank Amanda, our Chief Finance Officer, for her support with these reports. As you've said, Provost, I appreciate members will have read the report, so I will provide a summary of the most salient points. Section 1 of the report provides members the purpose of the report with information to consider when setting the rent charges for the council house rent, and also setting out the financial implications of the rent options. Section 3 sets out their climate change implications. Section 4 provides some background, with Falkirk being landlord to circa 16,250 tenancies, which the cost of providing council houses must be self-financed, and that 55% of these tenancies are protected from any rent increase, as individuals receive housing benefit or universal credit. Section 5 highlights our current average rent and provided in Appendix 1 the breakdown of what these monies are spent on. It also tells us we are the 5th lowest rent and we are the 15th highest spend on improvements to our properties. Within Section 6, sets out our commitment to our Scottish housing quality standards and our continued commitment to maintain our properties and estates, which is estimated at circa 6 to 8 million per year for the coming years, which will be discussed in more detail in our next report. Section 7 of the report highlights the main movements of the budget. It also refers to the removal of the trading account within BMD, which we are one of few councils left with this arrangement. This will remove levels of bureaucracy and also will support the values of a one council approach. Also within the section highlights the reduction of monies to our colleagues IJB due to previous years being underspent and the level of reserves that are ring-fenced for aids and adaptations held by them. As highlighted in the report and through discussions, if demand increased, this position would be revisited. Section 8 lays out our strategic planning process, and Appendix 2 gives the revenue and rent levels based on tenant consultation exercise. Also within the appendix are indicative rents for future years to support our required investment needs. However, this will be subject to further reports that will be presented to members as appropriate at later dates. Also, members will be aware that COSLA reached agreement that rent increase on average will be kept to an average of no more than £5 a week. And the proposed rise for Falkirk is well within this. Section 9 lays out the consultation that was carried out, and this is the last year of our 3-year preferred 2% rise indicated by our tenants. We will start next year's consultation later in this year and facilitating target engagement with easy to miss groups. Section 10 outlines affordability of a proposed rent and the verification of this and future rents using the rent affordable tool provided by Housemarque Scotland. Also within this section highlights the need to revisit the cost of heating and hot water within our combined heating and power systems. To support and prevent arrears, introduction of additional frontline staff identifying tenants who need assistance and support the council response to poverty and income maximisation. Also within 10.6, subject to tenants consultation and a further report to members, we have allocated initial sum of 250,000 to rent arrears support scheme that will allow quarterly matching payments to support and incentivise tenants to reduce arrears. Section 11 outlines the rent options and the reserve levels. A rental increase is required not only to fund financial costs associated with the housing investment programme, but also to cover the impact of inflation and other cost pressures. 11.6 outlines the relevant factors for our rent levels. As highlighted earlier, it is proposed that this year, in line with our consultation, a 2% rise this year equates to an average weekly rise of £1.47 per week, which is well below the £5 ceiling indicated by COSLA, as I said earlier. Section 12 of the report sets out the implications. So, Provost, in conclusion, increasing the rents is the only way Falkirk Council can continue to have sustainable investment programme and provide good quality housing. This approach is consistent with that taken by other local authorities. I would refer members back to section 2 of the report where the recommendations are laid out. Provost, I'm happy to take questions. I also have colleagues present and online to answer any questions if required. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr Gillespie. And now go to Councillor Meikle-John. Is someone speaking to your motion?
Provost, I'm going to refer to my portfolio holder and Councillor Bowes.
Councillor Bowes. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Meikle-John and Provost. As this is my first of these types of reports, can I firstly thank my predecessor in this role, Councillor Gordon Hughes, for his thorough and detailed work as housing portfolio holder. Gordon was a respected councillor across all parties and with council officers. I wish him all happiness in his next stage of his life. Can I also thank the council officers, as already named by Mr Gillespie, for the production of this report. Falkirk currently has the 5th lowest rent in Scotland, the 15th highest level of repairs and improvement expenditure, and the 7th lowest cost for supervision and management in Scotland. This is a credit to the efforts of our senior officers, the backroom staff and the frontline staff, and I would like to express my thanks to them as well. This report reflects a final year of a 3-year agreement by Council to hold the rent increases to 2%, as was voted for following consultation with tenants in 2022. It also includes using preceding year's underspending housing revenue account. I am pleased to advise that a £120,000 will be applied back to the reserve account this year. I'm therefore content to propose a rise in the cost of rents to 2% to meet future years' revenue and capital investment requirements. This fulfils the administration's agreement and council's agreement with the tenants of Falkirk Council and with the government's cost of living tenant protection Scotland bill to keep weekly rent rises to a maximum of £5 per week on average, as the monetary rise in Falkirk's rents will be £1.47 per week on average. Although not all councils have declared their rent rises yet, it is likely that the rise in Falkirk will be amongst the lowest rent rises in Scotland, if not actually the lowest. This rise is proposed under significant ongoing pressures, with general inflation currently at 10.1% and construction inflation index sitting at 17.5%. This inflation, as in common with our tenants, has had a detrimental effect on Falkirk Council's housing's revenue account. Spiralling interest rates, currently at 4%, are affecting borrowing and currently are being predicted to rise to as much as 6%, a full 4% above the UK government targets. It is predicted that they will drop back by mid-late 2024, but we hope that the predictions are wrong and that the interest rates can return to a lower level for housing revenue account and for all the residents of Falkirk sooner than is being predicted. The effects of the interest rates and inflation pressures can be seen in the additional property and capital costs of £1.39 million in the current year. For clarity, inflation and interest rates are not controlled by Falkirk Council. In saying this, any rise in rents will be a concern to the poorest people in the Falkirk Council area. However, circa 9,000 of our 16,250 tenancies will not be affected by this rise in rents, as they are in receipt of housing benefit or the housing element of universal credit. I welcome the measure to introduce additional staffing resource to assist tenants to maximise their income and to avoid rent arrears. This, along with the proposal for a £250,000 rent arrears fund to provide match funding for tenants' arrears payments, I see as a positive proposal and look forward to the detail of the scheme coming forward in the future. I know items 7.2 and 7.3 of the report concerning the removal of building maintenance statutory trading account and the reduction in funding of the IJB of £250,000 for aids and adaptations. Importantly, it should be noted, if demand increases, this will be revisited later. Affordability is a two-edged sword, as the rents have to be affordable to our tenants and the service have to be able to afford the capital and revenue works of the Housing Department. The Housing Department used the HouseMart Scotland affordability tool to assess the affordability this year and for future years, and that has confirmed that the rent increases this year and as a predictive tool for the following 4 years. I wish to continue the key performance indicators that I've already outlined in this report, and I want to continue to grow our stock of housing through new builds and buybacks. We will need the revenue to support these revenue and capital projects. As laid out earlier, the interest rates current and predicted, combined with inflationary pressures, will be vital in calculations of affordability, and they will be recalculated next year to allow council to make their decision going forward. I would confirm that we are not being asked to agree the rent levels for the additional years, but we have to be aware that under the current predictions, these are the likely figures we would need to consider just to keep the current revenue and capital investment. Additionally, the construction of energy efficient homes, and in particular energy efficiency works to our existing stocks, are essential to reduce our housing carbon footprint. If this programme of works is reduced, we would have properties that would increasingly become less energy efficient and could have a negative impact on our carbon footprint. Provost, I therefore propose the following motion to Council. Council agrees items 2.2, 2.3. Council further notes item 2.4 and substitutes the wording of 2.1 as follows. Council agrees to a 2% increase in rent charges. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bowes. Do you have a seconder?
Provost.
Thanks, Councillor Deacon.
Convener, can I take a moment just to thank the officers for the report
Okay.
and the entire staff base who do a lot of hard work for us all in Falkirk Council. As my colleague has mentioned, we are the 5th lowest local authority for rent in Scotland, however, we have the 15th highest level of repairs. I'm confident I speak for many in the room. Increasing the rent for our residents is something that we do not wish to do. Unfortunately, like we all in local authorities have a hard time this year. This, of course, comes down to many financial pressures such as inflation and interest rates, but also the economic constraints every resident and business are currently going through. With general inflation at 10.1% and construction index inflation at 17.5%, the interest rate is looking to hit 6% in the foreseeable future, all putting further constraints on the Council's revenue budget. This motion helps us not only grow, but also falls within the Scottish Government's cost of living. The 2% a week will have a mixed impact for residents. However, the proposed 250,000 rent arrears fund will be a great asset to help those that are struggling to provide match funding for tenants in arrears. In the next reports, you will see the positive contributions that is coming forward and has been happening in housing and why the rent increase will help. For myself, I also welcome the construction of energy efficient homes and the work carried out to assist the residents in reducing their carbon footprint. This will not only help with energy costs due to the loss of heat, better, more sustainable insulation, improved boiler systems, just to name a few. These updates not only help many of our residents, but also helps towards a sustainable Scotland. The more we can do to our existing stock and our future homes, the more not only can we save, but also residents can save. We as a local authority have a duty of care and to do the right thing for our residents. Meeting our sustainability goals will be one of the steps we can do to help achieve this. With this, I formally second the motion put forward by Councillor Bowes and reserve the right to come back in at a later time.
Thanks very much, Councillor Deacon. Councillor Hannah, do you have an amendment?
I have no amendments.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Kerr, do you have an amendment?
No amendment, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Spears, do you have an amendment?
We have no amendment, but I have a comment that I can come back in on later.
Okay, thank you. We'll now open up for debate. So any questions, just feel free. Councillor Spears.
I think it's a sad reflection of the times that we're in at present, and I don't think there'll be a person in this room disagrees. We are sticking to a limit of rent increase that'll affect only people that actually pay rent. You know, the great quantity of people out there, they're called middle income, they qualify for nothing and they pay for everything. As most of you know, I've been involved with food banks for some considerable time now. I think it goes back 10 years. I could never believe that it would last this long. But the majority of people that are using food banks now are working people, people who having difficulty with their mortgage increase, their energy bills, and trying to keep their home together and feed their families. We can continue to look after one section and they pay no increase, but we need to maybe even form a committee on this council where we would look at trying to help everybody, because I'm sure the messages of we are all in it together is quite clear, but we need to help everybody, especially working people who are trying to keep everything together at present. So I said I'd make a comment. That's my comment. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Spears. Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Provost. First of all, following on from that point, in 4.2, you have referred to the number of council tenants who will not have to pay anything, and that's certainly to be recognised. And in 10.6, you've also referred to putting in additional assistance to those people who might be adversely impacted by the rent rise. Now, following on from what Councillor Spears has said, we all know that it is people on middle incomes who are hurting most at the moment. I'd like to ask a bit more about how you're going to target that extra help to ensure that you are promoting take-up of benefits by those people who are brought into benefit entitlement by these increases, and those middle income people who may think they're not entitled to any help, but who may well be entitled to help. Because I absolutely agree with Councillor Spears that there are a great many people who previously would have regarded themselves as reasonably comfortable, who are getting very, very much more uncomfortable due to cost of living increases, all the other increases in costs, including this one.
Mr Gillespie?
Provost, I'll attempt to answer that, and I have a colleague on the call, Mr Ferguson as well, want to go on. However, one of the things that we have been doing, especially with that and additional resources, is very much capturing at source. So one of the things within housing services is we do annual visits, and that annual visit itself will pick up on some of the areas. But we're also revisiting individuals who have receiving some benefits and making sure that they're receiving all the benefits, and that's the catch-all scenario. And we also have the housing support fund as well that's been used, where it has to be a referral from one of the other areas of support. That then means that when that support comes in, we will look at, or officers will then look at, any other potential areas of support that can be given. Does that capture everybody? It captures everybody that we're aware of. We do have different ways of sending that positive message out, through online, through also individual visits through other work areas, i.e. for instance, our libraries, through our different community venues as well. But our strongest area is through word of mouth and making sure that we get that through there. We also use our tenants talk and other individual areas. That's a kind of high level overview, Provost, but I'm happy if my colleague Mr Ferguson would like to come in and just add to that.
Mr Ferguson, would you like to come in?
I'll certainly try, Provost, thank you. I think what Mr Gillespie was saying is what we're looking to is mainstream financial health checks across the board, so that any engagement tenants, no matter what the reason is, but we're looking into the financial circumstances of that household and identify what support, not necessarily housing benefit or universal credit housing costs, but what support can we provide them with. And I think that's become more and more prevalent within our workforce. And I think during 2023-24, we expect to see a real change in that culture, so that becomes common practice for every transaction we have, not just the housing staff, but across the whole council, where we're engaged with clients who are coming with one issue. We will address that issue, but we'll also look at the financial health and if anyone is appropriate and ensure the benefits are maximised. I think the £250,000 additional help will allow those who are in pre-existing debt to alleviate that debt and sustain their tenancy. But I think that fundamentally we do need to do, as Councillor Hannah said, and make sure that we maximise everyone's income at every opportunity and enable them to do so themselves where possible through the financial benefit calculator.
Thanks very much for that, Mr Ferguson. Do you want to come back, Councillor Hannah?
Thank you for that. If I may, sorry, I should have said at the start, I had a couple of questions. I apologise for that. So yes, I'm happy with that. I'll be interested to hear report backs from officers about the progress we are making in terms of promoting take up, because I do think it's very, very important ensuring people get help. But I do have another couple of questions. First of all, in relation to paragraph 5.3, there's reference there to the level of our rents being the 5th lowest and the level of our repairs being the 15th highest in terms of finances. Now, while I recognise that the amount of money is relevant, I think most of our tenants would say that what's more important to them is the speed with which repairs and maintenance is actually implemented. Now, I imagine that every councillor on this meeting, whether present or on Teams, has many, many examples of people raising issues about repairs that are required, raising issues about dampness, about black mould, about drafts, about a wide range of issues they have with their housing. Now, over a period while I've been a councillor, which hasn't, I admit, been very long, there have been a lot of people coming to me saying their concern is how long it takes and how long it takes to bring empty houses back into use. I wonder if you could say something about how you're going to make sure that this increase in rent is actually going to deliver in terms of improving the speed at which things are done and the quality of the work that is being done, because that really is what matters to tenants. People won't mind paying a little extra if they see a better service.
Thanks very much, Councillor Hannah. Mr Gillespie.
Provost, thank you very much, and thank you very much, Councillor, questions. So we are aware of the time it has been taking repairs. We've spoke about it in numerous other committees and council, and I've spoke to, if not every local member here. We have had a couple of setbacks in the back of the pandemic, try to get, again, resources to move forward on repairs. The one thing I will say is that the rent rise itself has a direct impact on housing investment. So, for instance, things that are commonly complained about, windows, doors, we have a substantial housing investment that will take that way, which then has an impact on other areas in regards to condensation, mould and other efforts there. What we do carry out is we do quality checks. We strive to get it right first time. To the best of my recollection, we carry out over 60,000 repairs a year from a reactive point of view. There will be a lot of repairs that we don't get right, or there, and that's the ones that you will hear about. You might not hear the vast majority that we do get it right. We are committed to getting them right quicker. There is things in place. There is additional procurement exercises in place now. One of them being voids that you mentioned earlier there, Councillor, where we're looking to bring on subsequent service providers to speed that process up. The other thing about voids is the standard of void that we put out in regards to the amount of repairs. We do a full complement of the standard repairs, where other councils only do the minimum, which is like, say, your basic health and safety checks, then sign up the tenancy and do the repairs wherein. We do the full repairs and to a level of decor. That was subsequently agreed by our tenants, from our tenants working group, and was accepted that it would take longer to do that. That does not take away it's taking longer than we expected at the present time, but that's because of issues in regards to service providers, getting them in the first place to do work, but also looking at different things that we can do to speed that up. It's certainly one of the things that myself and the working group are looking at to see that, but we're confident with the procurement process we've done, we will see a fundamental rise at the start of the new financial year of void properties coming back in.
Thanks, Mr Gillespie. Another question or a follow-up?
Thank you. I did have other questions, but I'll leave it at that. I would like to see some report back again on the level of improvement. I think it would be interesting to have a look, to have reports coming back to council about how quickly we are actually delivering in terms of our repairs and maintenance. But I'll leave that to when it's possible.
Thanks, Councillor Hannah. Councillor Steenback.
Thank you, Provost. It's just one question on 11.6 of the report. At the bottom it says nationally local authorities indicate they will increase rent levels above those proposed by Falkirk. Obviously, all local authorities are going through a budget process at the moment. Just wondering where those indications have came from. Thank you.
So, sorry, Provost. The indications that came through Alacho, which is Chief Officers of Housing, they're only a feeling at the present time, and that's why it's only mentioned there. We are asked to put what our thoughts are going to be, but not substantiate until each council's governing body has agreed them, i.e. today.
Just a quick follow-up on that. When will the figures for the next year, obviously after the budget process, be available?
Through you, Provost. Are you meaning from other councils?
Yeah, from the Scottish Government figures.
That will depend on when their actual committees are, and it could be another month and a half before we get that. But as soon as I get these figures, Provost, I'm happy to share them with members when they become available.
Thanks very much, Mr Gillespie. Councillor Number now.
Yeah, thanks very much, Provost. Just a couple of questions for you, Kenny, if I may. It's good that we're managing to keep the rents still very low. A 2% increase, however, is still an increase in the current financial crisis that we find ourselves in, and people will suffer even more because of the increase. It is good to know that we're still one of the lowest local authorities for charging rents in Scotland. That is good. Could you maybe just explain regarding the difference between void properties and empty properties? Because there is a significant difference between the two.
Mr Gillespie.
Provost. Yep. A void property is where it's still in the possession of Falkirk Council as such. So for instance, where there is no tenancy agreement in place. So we can have a void that we're working on now that we can put out to allocation and there is a previewing by a tenant. However, it's still void until the tenant signs the tenancy agreement. Sorry. I'm glad that was not me, thank you. So, but when the property has been signed up with the tenant, that becomes away from the void aspect, but it would then seem as being empty because we are then attributing rent to that property. And that's the position where a tenant may take a month of that to then decorate or other areas from there. In the past, it's been much quicker, but due to the issues that I said earlier, or I highlighted earlier, that the turnaround from voids is not where we want it, but we are looking to speed that up. So that's the main difference is when a tenancy agreement is signed.
Okay, thanks for that explanation, Kenny. My second point relates to the building maintenance trading account. Why are we doing away with that when it's been transferred building maintenance wise to police services? What's going to be used in place of that?
So it is more efficient. It's a one council approach. It takes a lot of level away of bureaucracy, as I said, about challenging in regards to the payment schemes and then what I mean by challenges, not the invoice of that, but just having additional staff to do that. We have a raft of indicators in place that we do measure the successes with our building maintenance colleagues. It also allows, with building maintenance being transferred to police services, other economies of scale that could be seen from the use of what I'll call resources, vehicles, plant, and also staffing, councillor. So the one thing that I always say is it's an internal service. We don't need to charge a child uplifts on that. This streamlines our process, and that's the environment we're in now, councillor.
Thanks very much for that, Ken. Thank you.
Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Provost. Leading on for what Councillor Nimmo says, Kenny, and I know we've had this conversation, but just for transparency, how many voids have we got?
Thank you, councillor. We're sitting at just circa 250 at the present time.
Okay. How many is a usual, an average?
Probably before the pandemic, we were probably sitting at 140 being the average at the time. However, I mentioned earlier about the new procurement that we're looking in place. Yep. We're looking to bring that understanding between 30 and 40 voids a week coming in compared to the 20 to 30 at the present time.
Thanks, Kenny. Just 250 houses. That's 250 houses that our residents can't get in. People have been waiting a while for to get a house, and it's rent we're not getting, it's council tax we're not getting. I know I didn't explain that to you, but as with regards to incentivising people to pay the rent, how can you incentivise somebody that's not paying the rent? How have we got to do that?
Provost, to yourself, one of the areas that we get feedback from our tenants is when you're in rent arrears and you do not have a payment plan in place, you can't then look for an additional another house, councillor. So one of the areas is the demand and the thrust and expectation that our tenants are looking for additional houses. Also, if there is a debt, whatever that debt is, if you're paying towards that, and that could be halved because of your commitment, that again is an additional incentive for them to pay their debt. We have, and you'll see figures, we do have a high level of debt that we write off, but this allows our tenants to be more proactive, to take ownership and pride in what they're doing. And many of them want to do that, it's just don't have the mechanisms. And this is something that we're looking to do to provide that mechanism.
Right, thanks, Kenny. On page 7.3, where we mention adaptations, I'm sure in the past, and I don't know if Patricia's on the call, I don't know if Sarah can answer. We had issues with not having enough adaptations, so why are we cutting the budget? Is it because there's no demand, or have we not got the people to do it?
Provost, if you're okay, Councillor, I can answer. It's not about demand. It's not about it's what's required at the time. There is always a demand for the adaptations, but it's the cost of the adaptations. And as quick as the adaptations are coming, there's teams there to do that work. What we're finding though is that because of things that we are doing previously in properties and targeting that, working with our colleagues in our health and social care, a lot of the properties have been adapted already, and that ties back into the next report where you'll see one of the things that we're trying to do as well. As I said, I can't predict the future, but at the present time, there is a high level of reserves there. And that's why within the report, we are more than happy to come back and look at that budget level if required. It's not that we're taking it away and it's not there. It's just for the present time, Councillor.
Maybe bring Mr. Tom in here if he's any comment to make on that item.
Not really, Provost. Mr. Gillespie's really explained the situation. We do have a bit of a backlog in terms of assessment coming out of the pandemic and the impact to staffing, but I guess once we get back to that position, we would hope to I guess, remove that reserve that we have and actually use the full budget when needed. We are at the moment reviewing our whole process around aids and adaptations, and I guess for me it was good that the council have left it open to come back should that position change, but the report really highlights at the moment we have an underspend in that area. So it's good that we can come back and review it, but the demand isn't there for the budget level that we have at the moment. Hope that makes sense. Thanks.
Thanks for your input, Mr. Tom. Councillor Kerr.
One quick question, probably maybe for Mr. Tom. So then I go away. How many, when you say we've got a backlog, how many properties is that, Martin? Do you know offhand?
I don't, Councillor. I could get that information for you, though.
Yeah, if you don't mind, just send it on to me. Thanks, Provost.
Thanks, Councillor Kerr. Anyone else? Councillor Colley, no? Did you have your light on?
Yeah, I think it was just a very practical question around the mainstream financial health checks that Paul Ferguson mentioned specifically, and I think that's a fantastic initiative. We know that many people across our communities are struggling. I suppose it's a practical question around communications and support to help us as councillors to help direct people to that around communication. So I suppose that just moving forward, if that would be possible, around some information for councillors for our surgeries.
Thanks very much, Councillor Colley. Councillor Redmond.
Cheers. Thanks, Provost. Just on 7.1, the main movements of the proposed budget, we've got additional costs for employees' expenses, property costs, and then also we're talking about £250,000 to help people in arrears. Is that, so that together all adds up to 1.9 million? Is that all the kind of estimated additional expenses, or is there more additional expenses on top of that?
Provost, yeah, that's the main areas covered by the headlines that's there that we're looking for a budget, Councillor.
Right. It could be more than 1.9.
We're not envisaging. Sorry, we're not envisaging. That's our best guess estimate at the present time.
Right. And then on page. Lost the page. The 2% increase raises 1.4 million, well, 1,450,000. So we've got 550,000 shortfall. Where does that come from?
In regards to our expenditure,
So your expenses have went up 1.9 million. Your council tax is only going up 1.4.
So that then ties back to our predictions of future work that we can do in the time, but also other costs that are coming down as well that we're seeing will help to impact that as well in regards to what we're looking to do, councillor, going forward.
So with regard to the cost coming down, what would that be?
Thank you, Provost, Councillor Redden. I think if you have a look at the Appendix 2 on page 14, you can see the 22-23 position and the breakdown of the budget compared to what we're expecting for 23-24. So that shows you the kind of areas where we're expecting to see some changes. So there's some minor reductions expected in things like support services, for example. But I think one of the other things to note is the other income line, which is around about halfway down the page. And that shows an increase in income through things like lock-up rentals and also the properties, the commercial properties that sit within the HRA portfolio. So when you think about the sort of block of flats that you see with the shops underneath, the rental income for those shops, for example, will flow to the HRA. So there is other income that comes beyond the housing rents.
Right. All right, perfect. And then just on page 14 for my next question, you can see the total income 70 million, and then next year, we're estimating seven. Is that if we don't increase council tax, or is that 71 million figure with the increase?
The way we've set the table out is the difference is the shortfall to be financed by the rent increase, which is the middle line in the table. So if you go down, you'll see there's the total expenditure, the total income. There's a shortfall to be financed by the rental income increase.
Right.
And that's the 1.4.
And then just one last thing was, well, on the table in Appendix 1, we had total expenditure 78.5 million. But then, well, it's total income, isn't it? So if your total income is 70 million, where did the extra 5 million come from?
Thank you. Yeah, Weeper. Thanks for this. So that's actually looking at the weekly rent. So that's not in millions, that's just in pounds. And it's just trying to show what a week's worth of rent gets spent on effectively. So you'll see the total expenditure equivalent equivalent for a week's rent would be £78.56. And then you'll see it says less income, and that's the income I was referring to a few minutes ago. So it's just breaking it down to say for your average weekly rent of £73.35, which is the 22-23 figure, you know, £29.60, for example, will go on maintenance and improvements. So it's the weekly rent.
That makes more sense. I was misreading that. Best thing need. Just one last question following on from the council tax, the void property, sorry. Obviously it costs us money because we're not getting the rent in for those properties, but if they're sitting void, does the HRA have to pay council tax on them as well?
Provost, no, they don't.
Right. Thanks. Right, thank you. That's all my questions.
Thanks very much, Councillor Redmond. You've already spoken, Councillor Spears, but I believe, have you got a question?
It's a point of clarification, actually.
Okay, fire away.
Thank you for your indulgence. The point of clarification is regarding Councillor Hannah's request for a report regarding housing repairs. I could give you numerous cases that I'm having, people waiting 2.5 years to get leaks in their roof fixed. People who have had a fire next door, no fault.
Is that a question you've got, Councillor Spears? Is that a question you've got?
Yes. Are we getting a report back on the condition, the problems that people are having with housing repairs at the moment?
Thanks very much, Councillor Spears. Mr. Gillespie.
You're welcome.
Provost, we provide a report in October as well, our position statements. That would be the next time I bring a report in regards to that, and that's our quality report that we're required to respond to the Scottish Housing Regulator.
Yes, thank you very much. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Provost. think I agree with just about everyone who's spoken this morning. I think it's been very informative. I have a couple of questions and a couple of observations. I will ask some questions and some of them will be quite rhetorical. Kind of going through the report we have in front of us. 9,000 of our residents receive a housing benefit. 7,250 do not receive benefit. Questions that I had were, again, a bit rhetorical. How are benefits paid directly to tenants or to the council? There's an additional management cost involved, 30% administration cost. So that's quite a substantial amount. Looking at the housing revenue account, 7.2 paragraph 4. Can you tell me how many houses we currently have for let and how many people we currently have on the waiting list seeking to rent, Mr. Gillespie?
Mr. Gillespie.
The amount of people who are on the waiting list at the present time is circa 7,500 at the present time. Okay. And the first question was, how many properties do we have?
How many houses do we, properties, correct term, Kenny, you're quite right, properties do we currently have for let?
The council has a stock of circa 16,500 at the present time.
Yeah. Maybe I'm not phrasing the question quite right. Apologies. How many are open for let then? I mean, we have 16,250 tenancies. Are you telling me there's another 16,000 houses available?
No. Is that you tying that? Sorry, apologies. The terminology I would use is how many void properties do we have that are available? Is that, okay. Sorry, that goes back to 250. Apologies, councillor.
No, it's me, Kenny.
Sorry.
250.
250 at the present time. That does fluctuate, but we're looking to try and get that back down to levels pre-pandemic.
Yeah, smashing. I appreciate that, Kenny. Our housing levels are extremely poor. We need to address this much better. What are our plans? Where is this identified in the report? Don't worry about that. It comes back into the housing improvement. Section 613, we'll come to that later on. 7.3 is quite a specific one. I've got serious concerns regarding the efficiency and operational methods of this element of the IJB funding. If the IGB regularly underspend when there's clear evidence to the contrary that they should be spending more, who initiates or authorises the aids and adaptations work? Shouldn't it be the HRA building maintenance and not the IGB?
So this is a partnership approach in regards to that. The budget does sit with the housing revenue account and that budget's passed across. So we are still the gatekeeper of the budget as such. We help support that for the IJB and it's there to make sure that it's flexible. What I will say, councillor, it can only be spent on HRA properties, so it can't be used for anything else but the HRA. And that's why we've took the decision at present to look at the reserves and also what our future spends have been. This money has also been used for other areas as well in regards to new build properties that we used in one of our new build sites.
So are the IJB spending that money that we are?
They are spending the money, absolutely. They are spending a proportion of the money that they're getting. As the report says, not at all, because it's demand-led and it's what demands are needing. I said that we've seen, as Mr. Tom has said earlier, we are aware of a backlog, but we are aware that our properties are adapted and we can only, there's going to be a point that we can only adapt so many properties and they have been adapted to meet future needs. So the budget that we're seeing here is what we feel at the present time is adequate to meet the needs of anybody. But if that needs to change, that's why the line's in there that we'll come back and revisit that and look at that back, councillor.
Okay, I appreciate what you're saying, Kenny. I think it does need to increase, but that's for later on. 8.4. we intended submitting an amendment here, but it was basically not competent because it's a budget meeting and we didn't give adequate notice. But where we were looking at proposing an amendment, I'll give you a rough idea of what our amendment entailed. Given the government caused a limit of £5 per week rent increase and how Falkirk Council are well within the limit, we propose and accept the 2% rent increase. However, we suggested a targeted BMS, a benefit management supplement of 30% of the proposed rent increase, basically an additional £1 a week approximately, to apply only to the 9,000 recipients of housing benefit. That would bring in something like £468,000 per annum in additional revenue. Now, you'll be horrified to say, well, why is he increasing the rent and whatever? I'm specifically targeting this to those who receive housing benefit. They don't actually pay that, the additional increase that we will be looking. All I'm trying to do is trying to get some revenue in here to cover our expenses. When I pay my rent, there's the money on the nose, done deal. Benefit recipients, we have to, the whole administration thing behind it of checking out how is this benefit paid, how is that benefit paid, does that go to, so there's that whole administration thing. I'm just looking for a kind of revenue stream that would help the council, assist the council with our costs. I'll just throw that out there. If I can move to rent affordability and arrears now, 10.2. There appears to be a serious disconnect between paragraphs 10.2 and 10.9. We have an affordability tool telling us that tenants can afford the projected rent increases. Meanwhile, rent increases continue to be higher than previous years. Why? What's the disconnect? What's not working? Power costs are going to make this situation even worse. Does anybody, I don't know if it's you, Mr. Gillespie, would anybody want to make a comment on that?
Mr. Gillespie.
Provost, I wonder if you could just give me the numbers again. Sorry, I thought you mentioned 10.9 and I'm not seen that.
Yeah, I will do, Provost. It's 10.2. I'm saying there's a disconnect between 10.2. The rent affordability tool, which is assessing the affordability for tenants. And sorry, I beg your pardon, Kenny. 10.9, where did I get that? There you go, mean figures.
10.3 could it be?
Yeah. It's possibly 10.6, Kenny. So what I'm saying is the affordability tool is telling us the rent increases are affordable, you know, and people are able to pay them. And yet at 10.6, we're hearing about rent arrears and how they're increasing. So it's just that wee disconnect.
Provost, for yourself. Yeah, the idea we've always had rent arrears. They've been increasing, and certainly one of the things that's highlighting that is the incentive to pay your rents in the past, and because of different government legislation in regards to the freezing of potential evictions or any other, because that's where it's had an impact on our arrears. But at the same time, we're trying to look at a positive way out for our tenants, and that's why the 10.6 is in there, is to where people see that rent debt, have we a way of allowing them to come out of that in a positive and dignified way, and that's where we see that. So it's not that we're not aware that the rents, the arrears are there, it's how do we support them coming out of their arrears. And we're hoping that the lifting of other areas that we've been under will again get back to pre-pandemic levels where we can have positive outcomes, Councillor.
Okay, thank you. My last point there was 10.4. Power costs are going to make this situation even worse. what do we think the review will tell us? How much of an increase can we expect to the two figures quoted? £527 per annum for a one-bedroom property, 637 for a two-bedroom. They're obviously going to skyrocket. You know, any idea on?
Provost, through yourself, at this present time we don't, and that's why I've not put the figure in there. We have a piece of work that's ongoing to see that on cost, and because it's through a combined heating person, it's more efficient, so we want to make sure the incoming costs are then reflected outwards to make sure that the balance, Councillor.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Gillespie. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks, Councillor McCabe. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Provost. I'll keep this fairly brief because it has been a lengthy discussion and a lot of questions, a lot of which could have been answered prior to the meeting this morning. I just want to say thanks to officers for the work that they've been doing and the report that has been brought forward, because I think it's a very balanced report. They have worked hard to look to maintain our position as throughout Scotland as having one of the lowest rents, and in fact I think this will be the lowest rent increase across Scotland, and that is a significant achievement. But there has to be a balance, and I'm just a bit concerned that that balance isn't being taken into account, or the bigger picture being looked at today. In that, you know, a 2% increase does allow us to have that investment into our properties, targeted at doing things like energy efficiency that will reduce the cost to all of our tenants across the board at a time when things are extremely pressured. So I think that factor is being missed in a lot of this. We do have a good housing stock, and we have invested in our housing stock over the years, and much more so than others if you actually look at some of the other local authorities and around the benchmarking. And I'm a bit concerned that there's a perception that we're not carrying out repairs. Yes, there will be the odd occasion where some repairs will get missed, and particularly during COVID things have slipped through the net, but these are probably very minimal compared to the numbers of repairs that we actually do carry out very quickly, very efficiently and very successfully. And I think we're doing a disservice to some of our staff by leaving the impression that, you know, there's a huge amount of repairs outstanding, which isn't the case now. It was for a while, just due to COVID and the circumstances around that, but a huge amount of work has been carried out in order to meet that demand as much as possible. And of course we do have a lag from the particularly severe weather just before Christmas. Again, you know, issues with workforce, supplies, materials, which everything we know is around at this moment in time, and I think that we just need to keep that in perspective. But as I say, I thank officers for the work that they've done, the report they brought forward, the plans that they have, recognising the pressures that we're under, and indeed the future consultation that will be carried out with our tenants around future rent rises and what we will be able to provide by way of investment in doing that. Thanks very much, Provost.
Thanks, Councillor Meikle-John. We'll now go to Councillor Brown. Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Provost. A question for Mr Gillespie. Can you confirm how many empty properties we currently have for rent, not voids, as we have over 7,000 people on the waiting list for homes?
Mr Gillespie.
Apologies, Provost, I'm not too clear for previous discussions. A void is the only property that we have available for rent. If they're empty, it means that potentially they have been signed up, but people have not moved in, so it still be classed as void until a tenancy has been agreed.
Councillor Brown.
Thank you. No further questions.
Go to Councillor Bowes if you would like to sum up.
Thank you, Provost. I'll keep it very short. It's been interesting to hear the questions been asked today, and again I thank Kenny and Amanda in particular for their answers to that. We have proposed a 2% increase in rents. We'll repeat that inflation is at 10.1% at the moment, and it has been as high as 11%. So I will leave it at that and commend this to Council.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bowser. I thank you for your brevity and your initial report. Councillor Hughes, his reports used to go on, were quite lengthy and everybody quite enjoyed them. So can we agree the report?
Agreed.
Next item is agenda item 4, Housing Investment Programme. And this is a report by Director of Transformation, Communities and Corporate Services. And Mr Gillespie will speak to the report, I believe.
Thanks again, Provost. You'll be sick of hearing me, no doubt, by the time we're finished here. Thank you. And as the previous report, I appreciate members have read the report. So again, I'll try and summarise it as the salient points as quickly as possible. Section 1 of the report sets out the purpose of the 5-year period for Housing Investment Programme. And again, through the report, the Housing Investment Programme, I'll try where possible to address that as the HIP, so I don't need to speak so much in regards to it, but in summary. Section 3 outlines the positive impact that the Housing Investment Plan will have on our climate change. Section 4 provides background on our position regarding the Scottish Housing Quality Standard. And as members will see, our last reported position was sitting at 60% fully compliant. However, this was due to 2 main areas: interlinked smoke detectors and electrical inspection condition reports. Members will also see from the report, though, however, we're 97% compliant to the energy efficiency standard for social housing. I'd also like to highlight that any projects not started will be carried over to the next 5-year programme. Section 5 provides a breakdown of the 184 million that will be spent on properties to the required housing quality standards, covering element of improvements, which includes our £5 million per year programme for windows and doors, energy efficiency works, estate improvement, and of course health and safety. Section 6 of this report highlights areas not covered by the Scottish Housing Quality Standard, such as new house building, buybacks, spending, which is a total of 143 million. Section 6.4, in line with Strategic Housing Investment Plan, provides an additional 555 council new properties and how it's funded. 6.7 outlines our commitment to our buyback scheme, with a budget of £8.5 million, bringing in an additional circa 80 properties per year. Although we have seen a rise in house prices in previous years, early indications are that the markets are slowing down. We are also targeting larger properties to meet our housing need and working with our colleagues in health and social care to identify larger properties where we can adapt these properties to suit family needs. The council receives circa 82,000 grant per house on the new build programme and circa 45 grant funding for buybacks, with additional funding for larger buyback properties from Scottish Government. Section 7 details the requirements to consult, meeting our statutory housing requirements. Under Section 8, the implications laid out, and Appendix 1 provides a summary of the expenditure plan. Although investment requirements have been based on the next 5 years, consideration has also been given to future investment requirements out with this time frame. Potential indicators are shown in Appendix 2. Based on the planned investment going forward, these indicators reflect significant increases in investment plan for the next 5 years. As a housing revenue account must be self-financed from rents, all costs must be met from rental income and or utilisation of reserves. A reserve balance of circa 5 to 6 million is considered to be prudent. However, to ensure projected capital investment levels are maintained after this financial year, future rent increases of around 4% per annum will be required for the remaining period of the projects. If a decision is made that the rent levels in the future will not increase by 4%, in the short term, it is likely that the proposed housing investment programme, or the HIP, will become unaffordable. 8.11 highlights the risks in the future delivery programme impacting the required rent levels, as so mentioned. Furthermore, there is added uncertainty in relation to future budget grant allocation from Scottish Government, and the rising cost of living could impact on the amount of income available and work to be completed. In conclusion, the level of housing investment is considered necessary to maintain a programme of improvements to our housing stock to meet the Scottish Housing Quality Standard and the energy efficient standard for social housing, and our continued commitment to increase our housing stock. It is estimated that a total of 328 million will be required over the next 5 years as an average of 66 million per annum. Provost, I would refer members back to section 2 of the report where the recommendations are laid out. And as previously, myself and colleagues are happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr Gillespie. Now go to Councillor Meikle-John to see who's going to speak to the report.
I'll pass over again to my portfolio holder and Councillor Bounce.
Councillor Bounce.
Thank you again, Councillor Meikle-John and Provost. There always seems to be a bit of confusion on the funding of the housing investment programme as part of the housing revenue account. For clarity, this account is financed from the rents of our tenants and is supplemented by Scottish Government grants in this year to the amount of 48,269,000. And that carries over for the 5 year of the programme. Sorry, I'll just make that clear. It's 48,269 for the 5 year period. I emphasise, though, this can only be spent on the housing portfolio. The total spend required to deliver the housing investment programme is 328 million over the next 5 years. Therefore, this report is dependent on the outcome of the previous report on the housing revenue account and rent rises. The Council's decision on that report will allow this to progress on the investment to upgrade existing homes and to build new energy efficient homes. I'm sure that all members of the Council will welcome the support for stronger and healthier communities and reducing inequality and supporting a reduction in carbon footprint both short term and long term. We have all received housing inquiries about defective drafts. The ongoing triple glazing windows and external door renewal programme at £15 million per year will by its nature improve the energy efficiency of 2,000 homes per year. This is complemented by our £7 million per year spend on re-roofing and external rendering. The vast majority of windows that we are replacing are 20-year-old air-filled double glazing, and there are a small number of single glazed replacements happening. Why do I say this? Because triple glazing is up to 4 times more efficient than the older air-filled double glazing and is 9 times more energy efficient than single glazed windows. I did have a lot of stuff on new values, but you'll be pleased to hear I didn't do a Gordon and I took that out of the report. This does not take into account the improvement due to the reduction in drafts and the positive effects of re-roofing and the external rendering. Further to this, energy efficiency investment in 2023-2024 is detailed as 2.3 million on heating system upgrades, 2 million in the high-rise flats receiving air source heat pumps, 1.5 million for air source heat pumps in off-gas areas, 750,000 for more efficient and effective heating in off-gas areas, and 1.5 million external cladding for Glenfair Court, although that won't be complete until the following year. This must be an investment worth making for our tenants and a positive way to deploy their rents. This will improve the environment our residents live in and help to reduce our tenants' energy usage, saving money on heating and significantly reducing the operational CO2 emissions of the individual properties. This investment in our current stock of housing to improve energy efficiency when you include the window renewal and re-rendering programmes is £134,800,000 over the next 5 years. This can only be described as a massive investment in our existing stock and good for our tenants and the planet. Moving on to new house building. We will invest 96.338 million over the 5 year period, supported by Scottish Government grants of 29,293,000. It is often queried as to the carbon footprint of houses. For example, a 2-up, 2-down, typically during construction, produces embodied emissions of around 80 tonnes of CO2. This will take circa 15 years to pay off that carbon footprint, and with an estimated house life of 70 years. This is due to the low and zero carbon generating technologies incorporated within these homes. Falkirk Council build to the Bronze Active standard and also to the Silver Aspects 1 and 2 standards, as laid out in the British Standards Technical Handbook of 2019. These properties produce on average CO2 emissions of 0.82 tonnes per year per property. There are relatively new regulations on the horizon to reduce the embodied emissions on new build housing by 30%. However, this is only the start as new technologies are being developed to reduce this even further, but they are still at infant stage of development. This ultimately will reduce the payback time of the embodied emissions, but retain the lifespan of the properties. I welcome the buyback of 83 houses in the previous year, with a focus on 3 and 4 bedroom houses. House price inflation on average has been 16% from 2021 to 2022, and the larger properties have increased in 2022 by 20%. This has meant that buybacks in 22-23 have costed 9.6 million, and the required budget for the next 5 years will be 47.5 million, supported again by the Scottish Government with £18 million worth of grant. On this, I welcome the increase in the Scottish Government grant from £40,000 per unit to £45,000 per unit. Finally, I welcome the further investment in our own stock of properties and kitchen renewals, bathroom renewals, electrical works, health and safety and estate improvements of 49.375 million over the next 5 years. I'd previously mentioned the inflationary and interest pressures we are having an effect. However, there is an ever-increasing demand for social housing, and the Strategic Housing Investment Plan, which involves housing associations, for want of a better word, but registered social landlords, and the council will look to produce 1,000 homes in this period. This, combined with our ongoing buyback programmes, when they are suitable and available, because you've got to have the available stock. We will increase the social housing stock in the Falkirk area by over 1,450 homes, as detailed in the SHIP, which was previously approved by committee on the 4th of October 22. Good quality housing stock is what our tenants ask of us. To that end, I commend the 184.175 million direct investment in our existing housing stock and the overall investment in housing of 328 million over the next 5 years to improve and construct homes for our residents, assisting with the cost of living and the global warming crisis. With that, Provost, I move the recommendations at 2.1. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bowes. Have you a seconder?
Councillor Devine.
Thanks very much, Councillor Devine.
Thank you, Provost. First of all, I'm pleased to see the significant investment in improving our current housing stock. Our tenants provide for these improvements through their rents, and it's right and proper that we in turn help improve their homes, including, for example, welcome the 2,000 properties per annum, seeing their windows and doors upgraded and improvement of paths, fences and walls. I also welcome the investment in the energy efficient works. Whilst members can clearly read the specific details of this, it is particularly welcome the investment in installing more cost-effective heating in off-gas areas, and of course in providing more energy efficiency, whether that is air source heat pumps or external cladding, or indeed improving the fabric of the buildings. All of these can both benefit tenants and the environment. I also welcome the ongoing investment in the expansion of our stock. We all know the challenges people across the district face, whether this is seeking a bigger or smaller home, those who need an accessible home to meet the changing needs or to enable independent living for the first time, or the many people seeking their first council home, particularly those who are experiencing homelessness. It is good to see the level of investment in new homes and buybacks. Every new house in this district find quality, affordable housing, which we can all want to see. Finally, I want to thank our housing officers who support our tenants across the district, and officers across a range of departments and the housing services and place services who will monitor and deliver the programme, seeking best value for money, which is vital in this current climate. With that, I'm happy to second the motion.
Thanks very much, Councillor Devine. We've now got to Councillor Hannah, see she's got an amendment.
I have no amendments, but I do have some questions.
Thanks, Councillor Hannah. Councillor Kerr, do you have an amendment?
No amendment, Provost. Like
Thank you.
Councillor Hannah, some questions.
Thank you. Councillor Spears?
I have no amendment, but I have some comments and questions.
Okay, thank you. We'll now open up for questions. Who's first? Councillor Spears.
Thank you. Mr Gillespie, for the housing and investment programme, you stated that we needed to have increased the rents by 4% to meet the housing quality standards. Since we only increased the rents by 2%, do you think the previous motion was worth going through? Because we're sitting here talking about improving the quality of the housing to meet the housing quality standard. You recommended something totally different in the previous motion.
The workers.
It's run out of juice.
I wonder why it's run out of juice.
We can't, you can't.
That's exactly what
Can you hear me now, Provost? Thank you. Sorry. Yeah, I don't think that. The earlier rent agreed level is required for this year going forward, which meets the expectations of our tenants and also meets the future year's capital programme. The 4% relates to the year after that, which would be the year 24-25. So, yeah, the agreed rent level earlier will support the housing investment.
I don't know if a lot of the tenants would say that their expectations have been met, but I admire you for saying it. It comes back to our rents repairs here, which I did mention in my point of clarification earlier. There is serious concern for some really long-standing, outstanding repairs. If you've had your roof leaking for 2.5 years, your walls are covered with damp and mould, and nothing's getting done, that's serious. We can't hide as elected members. I mean, social media, the people go on and they put pictures on social media, and it's quite horrific. And I agree with the tenants. They're working people, a lot of them, that are paying rents, they're getting a rent increase, and they're living with these conditions. That's why I would agree with Councillor Hannah's earlier statements, and you did clarify that we need to have a serious look. I am not getting at any of the present workforce. They can only work within the administration that they have at the moment. But the individual tenants that are suffering, we need to have a level of seriousness, you know, whether it's box ticking to say this needs to be upped in the urgency scale, but we need to do that.
You want to come back?
Yeah. Sorry, yeah, probably, sorry. Like yourself and local members, I can't hide it either from social media, being there, and nor can staff, and nor do they want to hide. As I said previously, there will be repairs in that slip through the net. We here, certainly local members, use a lot through my senior team or through myself. If there is something that has went on for 2 years and I'm not aware of it, please make aware, because it should not have happened for that long, or there could be other factors, but happy to take that off table, Provost, to look at them specifically, and just to confirm that all the teams take repairs and the quality of living for our tenants very serious, because that is their role. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr Gillespie. Councillor Hannah?
Thank you, Provost. I will be very brief. Just a couple of issues. First of all, in terms of this report and the proposals for the build of 1,450 homes, definitely welcome that. People need affordable, warm, safe houses, and we have to do all we can to provide them. My only concern in that regard is that, as was said earlier on in the previous in relation to the previous report, there are 7,500 people on our waiting list. So it makes 1,450 homes look less ambitious. Applaud officers for having come forward with the proposals they have, but hope that we can maybe be a little more ambitious in the future. Second issue is in relation to the off-gas areas. Now, the proposals in 5.7 and 5.8 for the installation of ASHP in the off-gas areas is welcome and has been long awaited. I wonder if you could give a little more information about when the installation will begin, when it is projected to be completed, because it is an issue that has given a lot of grief to a lot of people over a very long period of time, the lack of a mains gas supply. So if you could give us a bit more detail on that, I would appreciate it.
Mr Gillespie.
Provost, thank you. And information I can provide in regards to the off-gas area, to the best of my knowledge, is that the second half of the new financial year, our colleagues, Scottish Gas Networks, are starting to put in the gas main line itself, with hopefully completion by the third or the last quarter of the financial year. That's the timescale that's been given to our colleagues in Police Services, who are dealing with them directly. What I will say to members, as soon as the gas line for each area is complete and can be stopped, the council will be looking at procuring additional gas systems at that point for the installation of the system within the house. So we have to wait for the gas line to go in first. As soon as that complete, we will start then putting the actual systems in at the present time. You'll also be aware that where there was or where there is off-gas areas, we have contacted residents to see if they would look or would want to then also take one of the greener option systems as well, and we have them on a list, and that's part of the programme there. We'd look to install potentially 100 additional green energy systems within the off-gas areas as part of agreed previous years by members. Provost.
Thanks very much, Mr Gillespie. Councillor Hara.
Thank you.
Councillor Garner.
Yes, thank you, Provost. And I'd like to ask one question to Mr Gillespie, and it's around 6.4 and in particular the Old Denny High School Phase 1. And I see that's now been pushed back to estimated start date in April 27, which I appreciate is down to the cost of the units. I believe is something like, it was a ridiculous cost of something like £293,000 per unit, which I appreciate. But do you have any plans to actually try and bring this back online and bring it a bit forward?
Mr Gillespie.
Provost, for yourself. Plans are going online, and especially with my colleague next to me in the rights team as well. We are looking for more cost-effective ways of doing it. That would seem fruitful. That what you see in front of us now within there and the future plans is an affordable ship. So one of the things that I did say at a previous meeting is that we're doing everything to pull that forward, and we're confident, all going well, that we will be able to try and pull this forward for early spade shovel ready. Councillor.
Thank you, Mr Gillespie. And we really need them in the area, as you well know, so it'd be good to bring them forward if we can.
Everything's done, absolutely.
Thanks very much, Councillor Garner. We'll now go to Councillor Binney.
Thank you, Provost. I've got a question, I've got a wee comment, but just quickly I want to say to Mr Gillespie and all the housing staff and also all the maintenance staff, and I know that a lot of the inquiries that comes into me is actually very, very complex, and I know they do go out there and they do a great job, as a matter of fact. So I just want to thank them, because a lot of your officers just get taken for granted. Thank them on behalf of my community anyway, for a start. So I will ask my question now. It's actually, and I think Mr Gillespie will maybe know what I'm going to ask about. It's because this is asked of me quite a lot, actually, by my high-rise communities, and it's very, very important with the cost of energy at the moment. And it's the air source heating pumps to the 170 properties. All I really want to ask is, do we have a date for the consideration of the options to be given to our communities yet? Because this has been going on quite a long while, because we're supposed to get actually this heating, I believe, and it was obviously sort of put on hold because of the cost. And I think a lot of consideration through different reasons was given. So has this been settled now? That's my first question.
Thanks, Councillor Binney. Mr Gillespie?
Provost, yourself. Unfortunately, it's not been settled at the present time, Councillor. What's happening is we're reviewing the actual air source, the costs. As you quite rightly said, the costs that came in originally were increased tenfold, and it was not deemed as cost effective for the council to put that system in. We are looking at different options, and our internal teams from Place Services and Housing Community Services are working very diligent now to come back in the very near future, and it has been asked for the very near future, of an options appraisal and the way to go forward. And as soon as I have that, I'm happy to present that to members of the ward.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr Gillespie. Second question, Councillor
Well, it's actually more a comment or a suggestion, and I'm all for good engagement with communities and things like that. And we get asked a lot of questions. People come to me and say, when are we getting new windows? When are we getting new roofs? When are we getting new heating? And I'm thinking, but we're kind of missing out here. We're going digital, you know, if we're making all these improvements, you know, is it possible to have a digital map on our internet, you know, our page, Falkirk Council page, and let people say estate improvements, improvement works currently in place, dates, a sort of moving map to let people know, like when they'll get new windows, that sort of thing, when they'll get new doors, when they'll get new fencing, when they'll get a new heating system, you know, to let people see that. And to me, how that would work would be that, you know, it's really positive messages we're putting across there. They're paying their rent and they can see improvements coming in the future. So I don't know if that's possible or not.
Thanks very much, Councillor Binney. That does seem like a good idea, actually.
I would agree. It is a good idea. It's there already, Provost. The 3-year programme is there, and the new window is there as well. It allows you to see when it is. Now, you're right, it's indicative timescales. It's not, because there still is further, but we do a 3-year in housing investment online, and members get a booklet, and the windows is on there. I'm not saying we can't improve it, but it's certainly one of the avenues we want, so it gives wider awareness to our tenants and residents.
Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr Gillespie. Councillor Brown.
Councillor Hannah already asked my question to Mr Gillespie in relation to the mains gas and updates on timescales for that being installed. So I don't have any other questions. Thanks.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Brown. We'll now go to Councillor Patterson.
Thanks, Provost. Yeah, thankfully, Mr Gillespie has answered a lot of my questions during the course of the conversation. Top work. And whilst it is really encouraging, and I love your enthusiasm, Mr Gillespie, to hear about the villages in Upper Braes getting long-awaited plans in place, I do remain a little apprehensive, as we've already seen how price increases can cause delays in works. So I wait with anticipation to see those plans rolling out. But just in regards to item 5.8, when you spoke about, I know that 100 properties are being offered green technology where gas is not an option. Of those properties, if the residents agree to go forward with those plans, are we able to progress with those sooner, as they're not waiting for the pipelines to be put in place?
Mr Gillespie.
Provost, to yourself. There is a provision in the budget. Okay, I'll just, are you happy?
I think that's just a test. So.
Yeah. Yeah, there has been a few today. Yeah, I'll just wait now for. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for it. Thanks very much. So there is provision in the budget to do that. We are to install the 100 green energy for this financial year. So that's not dependent on the gas line for the green energy systems. That is programmed to go in for the new financial year on this programme.
Councillor Patterson.
Just love that answer. Thank you.
Thank you. Now go to Councillor Redmond.
Thanks. I just at 6.4, we've got a number of sites here. We've got total units. Do we have a breakdown of, like, we're going to provide 555 new houses? Do we know, are they going to be 1 beds, 2 beds, 3 beds, 4 beds?
Mr Gillespie?
Provost, yes, that we do have that for each of the sites. That ties back to our housing need demand assessment, and that's in the full SHIP report that would have been presented previously, breakdown. But again, any of these projects that can be provided.
Right, perfect. Well, do you think we could maybe get it, maybe an overview or something, since it is not maybe for the individual projects, but out of the 550, what's going to be what?
Happy to provide that when required.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr Gillespie.
Have all these got planning permission granted for them, and is there drawings in place here?
They will be at different stages in the appropriate time, because I'm not aware the actual of each individual projects, but we do work with our planning colleagues and they will have to meet planning. In the main, yes, they will have, because they're in the SHIP, but I don't want to categorically say yes, they'll have in case they're not. So my understanding will be, or they'll be on the way to getting planning permission, working with our colleagues with in-place services.
Perfect, cheers. And then just about a particular site in my ward, Seabegs Road, Bonnybridge. It's the site of a former council building. It's a gated tarmac area, but it's been left empty for maybe a decade now or something. You know, kind of following on from our last point about other income, it's not to start till 2027, which is 4 years time. Is that right? So it's not to start till 2027. Are we going to rent that, site out or anything over that time, or are we just going to have it sitting dormant? Or
that site is quite right. It used to be the old headquarters of your building maintenance division years ago, and it's part of the council's portfolio. It will be vacant. It was held up for a bit because negotiations due to commercial interest as well. So it wasn't just about the housing aspect. So it brought commercial properties there. Until that date, we will have no use for it unless there's anything else comes up for the use. However, if something does come up that can be used and ties into the timescales of the SHIP there, then I'm sure the council will look at it. The one thing I would caution in that is, as I said earlier to councillor, is that the SHIP is fluid. If you rent this out and have an agreed period, that then really stagnates that project if we had an opportunity to bring it forward. So it just depends on what we'd look to do. But there is no plans, as far as I'm aware, to put that out for any other costs.
It's just, I understand what you're saying, but it's disappointing that a site that's next to, companies like Class 1, Moffat, Central Demolition, Clan Distribution, they're all big lorry companies. They're all crying out for space, and I've never seen it advertised for renting. That's like a loss of income potentially for the council over so long. So, but we'll move on for that point anyway. 66 million. Councillor Garner made a good point about it was costing £290,000 per unit for a council house to be built. Why is it so dear? Is there
Mr.
Provost, through yourself. That's through various different reasons, but the biggest reason is we build to varying needs, which is different for your private sector, which means that wider corridors, different stairs, different build design is the biggest area of why it costs so much. However, if you have been in our new build properties, you will see they are of a really high standard, and that's the expectations of our tenant, but they're also built for future proofing as well. And it's one of the things that was agreed in previous councils, that when we build a property, we looked at the longevity of it and where certain rooms could be then converted if required. So it meant that a lot of tenants could stay within the environment or community they're in with the support that they're in with potential neighbours and things like that. That's some of the main reasons there. But as you heard earlier, we're also working with colleagues in place service to see where we can shave some of it off to bring that cost down.
Cheers. So see, in terms of building it, is that 290 if the council built it in-house herself, or is that if Haddons or someone built it? Or?
That's whoever, but the council don't build internally, so that's external, and that includes land, if we bought the land, all expenditure for a finished product.
Thanks. And then I'll just move on to my last point, which was on the very last page, 25. We've got £328 million worth of expenditure. with £49 million coming in from the Scottish Government grant, but we'll get prudential borrowing here, £278 million. So 85% of this is funded through borrowing. That's right, isn't it? So the HRA is getting saddled with quite a bit of debt as well. So that was just my last point. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Redmond. Councillor Kerr?
Thanks, Convener, and I'll be brief. And as the leader of the council says earlier on, some of these questions could have been asked previously, but I think it's imperative that they're asked at this meeting for our live stream for our residents. And a lot of questions will have been asked previously, and we've had the answers, but to get in for openness and transparency. Anyway, the first question is on page 20 on 6.4 on the chart. House at Torwood, still not occupied. I've got a reason why. It was supposed to be September last year.
Mr. Gillespie?
My understanding, and I'm watching here, is that there is discussions between the council and the housing provider, the builder, in regards to the standard of the work in other areas that we're holding the site up. But I know my colleagues in Place Services are pushing that very quickly at the present time. So all due diligence is getting carried out to make sure that a quality product is provided for our tenants, councillor.
Councillor Kerr?
Aye, I'll hear that conversation offline, Kenny. Right, okay.
That would be helpful.
And my last question is regarding the Wood End Farm, 111 houses. How many houses per year will we get back, Kenny? It says we're going to be complete by May 2025. So how many are we going to have completed year on year?
Provost, to yourself. What I can tell you is we're looking to get 50 properties back before the end of this year, not just in Wood End Farm, talking about in total, and 50 the next again year. That was as far as my research had went, and then trying to anticipate questions for members, but I can then look at further, but that's what I've got for this one, and the next one would be 50 in each, give or take when they're finished over the financial year aspect.
Obviously that's not on the 555 because some of them not even started yet.
That's correct.
So the ones that started.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and also you would have that supplemented by buybacks as well. Yeah. That's just new build.
New builds, yeah. Right, thanks, Ken.
Go to Councillor Nimmo now.
Yeah, thanks very much, Provost. First of all, Kenny, thanks for the report, a very detailed report. As the Labour Group Housing and Community spokesperson, none of my questions should really come as a surprise because we have ongoing dialogue, we have regular meetings to discuss housing issues. Just in relation to the 555 predicted new properties, how realistic is this figure going forward? We've obviously got the Greenport situation, which is hopefully going to bring 20,000 new jobs to the Grangemouth and Falkirk area. So how realistic is this figure of 555 new properties going forward? That's my first point.
Mr. Gillespie.
Provost, so realistic, it's as realistic with the information we've got. We are confident that that can be achieved. As I said earlier, I have highlighted in the previous report on this the risks of rent levels and funding for the 555 there. With regards to is there going to be increased housing because of the Greenport aspect, that will channel itself through our housing need demand. But as we've previously discussed before, it's how many will that actually come through as, you know, and we will respond to that directly or indirectly, and we have different mechanisms to do that through our partners, through RSLs, through different things in regards to our buyback programme and taking that forward. So at the present time, like any of us, we don't know what the impact of that will be in truth, but we have mechanisms in place that will hopefully address the main issues of any additional jobs that will come that need housing within the area.
Okay, thanks for the explanation there, Ken. It's already been said, it's really important that we get answers to these questions because we're live streaming for the public's benefit. So that they need to know that the answers to these questions. My second point relates to the buyback scheme. Obviously a very important scheme. Currently there's 80 properties roughly per year being bought back. And it tends to be the most cost efficient way to increase our housing stock. What's the scope for increasing this in the future?
Again, Provost, through yourself, sorry, Provost. Yeah, we have increased the budget in line with the increased costs. What we are doing now is targeting what's most needed. There is a fine balance here to what we're looking to buy to support our communities, because we're also aware that other constituents of Falkirk Council will be looking to get onto the housing market, and because we are only entitled to buy back council properties, that being the more cost effective if you're trying to get on a housing ladder, there is a fine balance. Like anything within reports, we can do as much as we can if we've got the budget we want. However, it's got to be balanced with need and the wider areas of need within the public, not just about our council tenants, but our other residents of Falkirk Council. So, in essence, I feel, as the Chief Housing Officer, that 80 a year is manageable. It allows us to target our most needy, but at the same time, we have flexibility if we needed to increase that for any eventuality.
Okay, thanks for the explanation again there, Kenny. My last point's in relation to the money we get from the Scottish Government. That's currently, I think it's 45,000 per unit for buybacks. This programme takes us up to 2028. How do you see that figure increasing from the Scottish Government, or will it be a flat figure?
Mr Gillespie.
Provost, through yourself. As said earlier, we've just had a rise of 5,000 per property. We have indicative for the next 3 years of that being the cost, which is helpful, really helpful. Because it's a 5-year programme, I put that as a risk because I can't speak for Scottish Government for the last 2 years. 45,000 really works out roughly about a third of the cost, which is very helpful and allows us to maintain what I'll call one of the most ambitious buyback programmes within all local authorities, with Falkirk being one of the first that ever approached us. So I've no fears about the present time with the budget in regards to buybacks and the monies we're getting, which has increased over the years from original starting from 18 to 20,000 about some 7 years ago.
Okay, thanks, Ken. Okay.
Thanks very much, Councillor Nimmo. We'll now go to Councillor Bundy.
Thank you, Provost. Am I correct in believing that the cost of building a house has went up by £30,000 in the past year?
Over the duration, whenever the contract had been priced, so it may have been priced a year or 2 years ago, and it's came onto site at the time of there. So that would be correct if you take it in these parameters, Councillor.
Thank you, Kenny. £290,000 for building a house does seem extraordinarily high compared to private sector rates. So would it be possible to get a complete breakdown of how it gets to this very high figure?
And that was of one project. That's not all of the projects, and we do have averages now across all projects, and happy to provide members with that breakdown as an overall, rather than a contractor be uncomfortable with potential commercial sensitivities of that, but could maybe look at an overall of all the new build to what the average costs have been over varying contracts and keep the names out.
Thanks, Kenny, and I appreciate the confidentiality of contracts. I've got one final question, which is regarding point 6.4. It lays out that there will 555 new homes and that be built, but it also says that the council has a programme to build over 1,000 new homes. So I was just wondering where the other homes are.
Provost, maybe that's not been as clearly worded as it could have been. We've already built 445 private lists extend, and that would bring our total up to 1,000 new homes once this programme had been complete, Councillor.
Yeah, thanks for that clarification.
Thanks, Councillor Bundy. We'll now go to Councillor McCabe.
Where are the other 445, 45 houses? I was just pointing out to Councillor Bundy, I had the very same question, Kenny. Where are they? Are they spread throughout?
Yeah, they're spread throughout the area that tie back again to our housing need demand, and there's various sites over the last 5 years that's happened.
Smashing, thanks. Page 19, 5.4. We're looking at spending £15 million per annum, with the average cost of £7,500 per household for double glazing, doors and stuff like that. Seems quite expensive given the economies of scale. We're talking about spending £105 million worth over 7 years. Is there anything we can do to drive down that cost?
Mr Gillespie.
Provost, this went through a very substantial procurement process. It went out to market, and I think, although we're saying £7,500 for that, I think I'd go back to the standard of what we're putting in, the triple glazing and the future proofing it. Again, hoping to try and minimise any additional on cost to our tenants and residents. We're having that in regards to the fuel poverty issues that we have at the present time. So I would tie it back to the quality that we're getting for that money, Councillor.
I appreciate that, Kenny, and I did pick up on Councillor Bows's point earlier on. I thought it may have been that. Thank you. Again, just for transparency for our residents watching, can I ask at 5.9, why are we replacing external cladding? I've got an idea. What grants, if any, have we received to allow us to carry out this work?
Provost, to yourself. It's actually, we're renewing the cladding because its life expectancy requires it to be removed now and changed, because it was done many years ago. I'm not aware of what grant funding we have received that, but happy to provide that back. But where there has been grant funding, we certainly diligently grab that as quick as we can when we're doing any external cladding.
Partly the reason for my question there, Kenny, I thought it may have been tied in with the Grenfell situation, but no, you've just clarified it. It is actually end of life, if you like. I appreciate that. Thank you. Moving on to the non-SHQS investment of £28.6 million per annum. Where are the 445 new houses? We've got that. So already been mentioned, 6.5. The final project, Old Denny High School, is not due for completion until 2030 in the table here. Now that's 25% of the indicated total, and it was also 2 years out with the reporting period. So I had a wee bit of concern about that. I understand you're now trying to pull that back, if you like. I'd be interested, please keep me updated with that. Appreciate that. And that actually made paragraph 6.6 more critically important, where we're talking about the recognition of rising construction costs. You know, so the longer we let this go out to 27, 28 before we start, costs are only going to go up. So, yeah. Paragraph 6.9. I think this initiative is to be lauded. Again, I don't think we're even touching the sides. The situation is actually acute here, and I think it's getting even more acuter. Just inventing a word. Paragraph 6.11. It's also to be welcomed, the approach to meeting the affordable housing need. Glad to hear your previous answer about the increase 40 to 45. I was going to ask, is there any way that we can be lobbying the government, or do we have any intention of lobbying the government to increase this funding? It's following on from Councillor Bundy's kind of probe.
Provost, to yourself, that's the reason why we've got the additional expenditure on the buybacks, but also the new build as well, because of other local authorities as a collective group lobbying and trying to come into balance with our partners and registered social landlords. So we have been doing that. There is constant discussions on the way forward, and I know in the coming years there'll be future revision of looking at the cost of new build and buybacks.
Smash, thank you. 6.13, the LHA initiative is to be warmly welcomed, and I hope it will be expanded in future years. We really do need these adapted properties like never before. And the final point, Provost, is on 8.3. Maybe this is a wee, if Amanda maybe wants to make a wee comment. I just have a a concern about the underlying need to borrow for the HRA going from 300 million to 465, 155% increase capital funding. You any comments to make on that, Amanda, at all?
Mrs. Templeman.
Thank you, Provost. Thank you, Councillor McCabe. I think there's no limit set on what councils can borrow either for general fund or HRE. The councils need to set their own limits based on what they think is affordable, prudent and sustainable. And this ties back to the conversations and the debates that we were having as part of the housing rents report. So at this point, for the HRA, we work out a 50-year model so that we can try and ensure, based on the assumptions we have, that any investment that we make just now or in the next sort of 5 to 10 years will be affordable over the period that's getting repaid. And at this point in time, we can see the borrowing costs increasing, and I think that's reflected in the budget report for setting the rents. But we do think it's affordable, but it's only affordable if the rents rise in the way that was outlined in the housing rents paper. So there is a risk around affordability. There's a risk around whether the housing rents are set at the levels in future years. There's a risk around what the interest rates are doing at the time that we're borrowing, albeit we're hoping that they will start to reduce in the coming years. And then there's also a risk around construction inflation. So I think when we're looking at all of our investment reports, we've tried to sort of frame them to say that all of those things will need to be considered on a regular basis, and we will need to potentially come back to members to flex the report. I think if you look at some of the other councils that have got housing stock, you can see that housing revenue accounts tend to have a much higher proportion of their income going towards borrowing costs and repaying investment. I think just because the nature of the housing revenue account, the fact that it's all sort of ring-fenced and self-financing. So what's proposed in the paper at this point is considered affordable. Tried to put some caveats and risks around that in the paper. And if there was any change to that, we would obviously have to come back to members and seek a different approval.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Templeman. That's me finished. I'd just like to pass on my thanks to the officers, particularly Mr. Gillespie and Mrs. Templeman just at this moment. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks very much, Councillor McCabe. Now, there's no amendments, but we'll give Councillor Bowser an opportunity to briefly sum up.
Thank you, Provost. Again, I didn't actually say it in this minute at starting first. Can I also thank the officers for the hard work on this? And there is many officers who are not here today who've done quite a bit of work on this. The important thing is and actually go look at 2 reports here. This report and the previous report tie very, very closely together. In the previous report, we increased the rents by 2%. There was in that one where we showed a weekly breakdown of how people's rents are paid. This is showing you where we're investing it. And I think when we're talking about putting £134 million spent over the next 5 years for making our homes more energy efficient, that's only going to help the people. It's an investment with the increase of rent that will help them in the long term. It's been interesting hearing the questions. I had actually thought we would get more on the energy efficiency side of it, but I'm assuming then that council are just absolutely delighted that we're actually spending that amount of money on energy efficiency. I will repeat what I said at the start of it, remembering that the whole of this investment is paid through the rents of our tenants and money from the Scottish Government supporting the people of Falkirk over the next 5 years. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bowes. So can we agree the report? Thank you.
Agreed.
We'll now take a short 15-minute comfort break. Thank you. Thanks everybody. That's us back to live streaming again. So if we could settle down a wee bit. So the next item of business is agenda item 5, service concession arrangements, which we've all been well briefed on. Hopefully we'll went up the learning curve. So we'll just go straight to Ms Templeman to summarise the report and recommendations. And the report is just for no time.
Thank you, Provost. So the report in front of you all today is fairly complicated with significant financial consequences. So I am going to take maybe a little bit longer than I normally would to go through some of the key points that I think members need to be aware of. We did hold a members briefing session on the 6th of February and it was well attended, so apologies if members feel that they've heard a lot of this before, but I'm hoping it will be helpful to reiterate some of the main considerations for members. And there's really four main areas that I would want to cover. The first is to make sure everyone's got a clear understanding of what service concession arrangements are. The second is to understand how the guidance works. The third is to note the costs associated with the service concessions, and then finally how we could use service concessions and the risks. So I'll just touch on each of those areas. So firstly, what do we mean by service concessions? A service concession arrangement is the term that's usually given to a contract between a public sector body and a private sector body, where the private sector body provides a public service for a period of time. And at the end of that period of time, the private sector body is usually required to hand over the service concession asset at the end of the contract. So as members will be aware, that kind of arrangement's been used to provide hospitals, schools, prisons, bridges and so on across the UK. And in Falkirk, we have two of those arrangements in place, and they're both in respect of our high schools, and that's set out in paragraph 4.2 of the paper. This report deals with changes to the accounting treatment of those two arrangements. And so it's important to stress that this doesn't in any way change the existing contracts, and it has no impact on the contractors. So it's a technical accounting change only. The Council has previously considered reports on the return of the Class 98 schools at the end of the contract. And this change does not change the position on those Class 98 schools that members have previously been advised of. The proposed changes to the accounting treatment for service concessions has been the result of discussion between Scottish Government, COSLA, Directors of Finance, SITFA and Treasury advisors. And it's been going on for a long time, and it's at times been a very difficult process in terms of getting guidance agreed. And that's partly because these kind of contracts vary so much across the local authority landscape. The final guidance for this area was issued in the autumn of 2022. And since that time, all local authorities have been working with their Treasury advisors to better understand the implications for their council based on their individual contracts. So the implementation of this revised guidance is happening across Scotland, and Falkirk are not unique in this respect. So I'll briefly turn to how the guidance works. At the moment, the council pays a unitary charge for each contract on an annual basis, and that's made up of three parts: the payment for services, the payment for the repayment of debt associated with building the asset, and interest on that debt. So the changes to the guidance for service concession arrangements only deals with the repayment of debt. For Falkirk, the total debt that will have been repaid at the end of the contracts is £176.2 million. And I will try and explain the rationale behind the change to the guidance. So ordinarily, when the council borrows to invest in an asset, it will repay the borrowing roughly over the expected life of the asset. So it's about matching the use of the asset to the cost of the asset. So if a road was going to be used for 15 years, we would borrow for 15 years and we would repay that borrowing over a 15-year period. And that means that the council taxpayers who are helping to fund the payment of that debt will be the ones that will be using the asset. And so it's seen as fair. So a more exaggerated example would be if you had a building that would last for 40 years and you chose to repay the debt over 5 years, then those council taxpayers in those 5 years would be unfairly burdened with that debt for an asset which would have a lot longer use. So, however, the previous guidance for service concession arrangements had said that the payment for the assets had to be accounted for over the life of the contract and not the life of the asset. And so these arrangements are the only assets on the council's balance sheet that are treated in this way, because all other assets will be borrowed for over the life of the asset. So the revised guidance effectively is changing this to say that the council can account for the repayment of debt over the life of the asset. And so that's aligning it with the accounting treatment for all other assets in that respect. For our schools, we are anticipating that the council will have the expected life, of the school will be 40 years. And that's based on some of the work that we've done with our district valuers. And all our calculations are based on a 40-year lifespan for the schools. What's important about this change in guidance is that local authorities are allowed to apply the guidance retrospectively. So that means we can look back at what we've paid to date based on the contract life, and we can compare that to what we would have paid if we had been using the asset life. We are still repaying the same amount of debt, as we've said, the £176.2 million. But if we look at Falkirk Council's example, in repaying the debt over the length of the contract, that means that by the 31st of March 2023, the council will have paid a total of £97.5 million. However, if that debt was being repaid over the life of the asset, the council would only have been due to pay £26.5 million by the 31st of March 2023. And so that means that there's a technical overpayment of £71 million. And that's referred to in the report as the retrospective adjustment. I think it's worth highlighting just that those calculations have all been undertaken by our Treasury advisors, Link Asset Services, and they have done a similar piece of work for most of the local authorities in Scotland, and they were also involved in developing the guidance for the service concessions. So those calculations are summarised in Appendix 1 of the report. It's also worth saying that the focus of the guidance is on the calculation and the accounting treatment of the service concession arrangements. It is not looking at how service concessions can be applied going forward, so that's left to the council to determine in a prudent way. If I just turn to the costs associated with service concessions, I've already said that the proposed changes don't impact on the existing contracts or contractors. So there's no money coming back to the council from the contractor. Therefore, if the council wants to use any of the £71 million of the retrospective adjustment, it will need to borrow for it. One of the complexities for Falkirk is that the borrowing arrangements are different for the prepayment element, which is highlighted in the report. Once the council decides to take this benefit in 23-24, it needs to make a loans fund advance. And that's the same thing we would do for any other area of capital spend that's funded by borrowing. Once we do that, those funds will go into a reserve and the council will start to pay interest on them. So the prepayment totals £21 million, and we anticipate that borrowing will cost us about £16.5 million in interest until the advance is repaid in full by 2052-53. Now that interest rate is an estimate because it will depend on prevailing interest rates over the period. For the remainder of the retrospective adjustment, which is around 50 million, the council will only incur borrowing costs once it's decided to use the money. So the full sum will be put into a reserve from the 1st of April 2023 if agreed, and then when a decision is taken to apply that reserve, the money will be borrowed, and we can do that potentially internally or externally, and then we will start to pay interest on it. And again, those interest costs will be determined by the prevailing interest rates at that point in time. But if we chose never to use that £50 million, we would never pay any interest on it. So a big part of what we'll have to do will be monitoring interest rates and looking at the potential impact on our capital charges on the revenue budget. And we will update our financial strategy to reflect any changes. But at this point, we think we are anticipating that we will be able to meet the additional borrowing costs that will come, particularly from that prepayment. We think there's sufficient budget in the capital charges budget. Section 5.5 explains how the repayment works, and there's a table at 5.5.1. And again, that's just really emphasising that the council will pay the same debt overall. It's just that it's paying it back over a longer period. That table also shows that as well as the £71 million retrospective benefit, there are further overpayments in the near future. For example, 5.2 million in 23-24. And again, that figure would go into reserve at a future date. However, members will note that there's some commentary in section 5.5.3, and that notes that officers will look to smooth out the repayment profiles as far as possible in future years. And again, we will factor that work into our financial strategy. So if I turn to the use of service concessions and the risks associated with them, section 5.7 of the paper discusses the use of service concessions. And the key point that I'm trying to emphasise is that the council has a significant and recurring budget pressure, and service concessions are not recurring funding. So the council must work to identify recurring funding and reduce the budget gap. For 23-24, we can see that the service concessions will buy the council some time to help make the changes that are required to reach a financially sustainable position. And members will now have seen the budget papers that have been issued, and it's proposed that £15.3 million of service concessions are used in 23-24. The chart on the top of page 35 was written before the proposals were finalised, but that at that point in time was suggesting the use of £15.2 million of service concession arrangements. And that chart illustrates that unless £15.2 million of recurring savings are identified for 24-25, we would again have to apply £15.2 million of service concessions in 24-25, plus whatever the remaining gap is in 24-25. In the illustration that's in the chart, it would mean that we'd be applying £24.5 million of service concessions in 24-25 as things currently sit. So that means that in 23-24 and 24-25, in that illustration, in only 2 years, almost £40 million of the £71 million would be used up. And the chart at the bottom of page 36 shows the worst case scenario, where you could see all service concessions used in the next 2 years and a budget gap of over £50 million to be found in 25-26. So those charts have been included to illustrate the risks that accompany service concessions and to emphasise the need to use this benefit wisely and prudently. If significant recurring savings can be identified and approved, the need to use service concessions to support a balanced budget would be reduced. And that would then bring an opportunity to use the benefits for other investments. However, that can only be possible if there's some assurance that the council will be able to reach a financially sustainable position. And I just have a couple of other points to note. Within the guidance, members can only decide to implement the guidance in 22-23 or 23-24. So if it wasn't approved in 23-24, it can't come back in 24-25. Members will be asked on budget day to agree to implement the revised guidance, but there is a slight complication. The report highlights that part of the retrospective adjustment comes from a prepayment, as I've already mentioned. There are variations in how the prepayment must be treated. And so if members agreed to implement the guidance in respect of the prepayment on budget day, which is the 1st of March, that would mean the change would be implemented in 22-23. But we don't need to implement that change until 23-24. So our proposal is that we bring that back in 23-24 for approval. So it's deferring the decision on the prepayment element only. And I have confirmed that approach with officers in Scottish Government, and they've confirmed that they're happy with that. So that will be the nature of the decision that members will be asked to make on the 1st of March. I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, thanks very much. So we'll go to Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Provost, and I just want to say thanks to Amanda and her team. This has been very, very complex, and she has pulled the report together and has done her absolute utmost to try and bring some plain English and understanding to something that is complex. The report is for noting, and it provides detailed information on the service concessions. And there have been extensive member briefings on the service concessions to all members and individual groups, and indeed today. But I do appreciate that it may well still be quite complex for people to understand and get their head around. It's been important to do that and to have this report today to ensure that all members do have an understanding of the change of the technical accounting and what it actually means for us. As Amanda's as detail getting, this flexibility has been very protracted, and it's been a process over a number of years to reach agreement with government about how these particular contracts should be treated the same as others, and that the borrowing can be taken over the lifetime of the asset rather than the loan period as it was agreed. And it's right that due diligence should be taken and that so that all the risks associated with that, so there's no unintended consequences as a result. Creating a technical reserve, which is very welcome right now when we have unprecedented financial pressures with a gap of around 65 million to be filled over the next 4 years, with the biggest gap being this year of 25 million. Prospect of a similar size gap for next year and the continuing financial uncertainty that's before us. It's been very timely that we have the ability to use service concessions at this time and develop savings, allow time to develop savings proposals. Otherwise, the savings would have to be far more invasive and acute to our communities much sooner and without time to explain and prepare. What the service concessions will not do is eliminate the financial gap. There's still a need for £65 million worth of savings to be found. However, the service concessions, if used appropriately, can help smooth out the budget gaps over the next few years and buy us time to identify savings proposals, develop different delivery models and areas where we can improve on our income generation and get us to a position of financial sustainability. And only once we get to that point, we'll be able to look at what else service concessions may be used for in the form of investment. What it won't do is increase the debt that is due to be repaid over the contract. The repayment will remain the same, just over a longer period, so the annual payment will be less and we will get the benefits of that. The decision on the application of service concessions has not been made today, but it will have to be made next week at our budget meeting, and today's report is for noting. But it's an option that is very welcome right now to help us balance our budget over the next few years and to help us to reach that financial stable position. It will not, however, take away the need for very difficult decisions around service savings. So I thank Amanda for the report, and I appreciate there'll be a number of questions members all want to ask. Thank you.
So are you formally moving the report, even though it's for,
Yes, yes.
and do you have a second, though?
It's happy to second and reserve the right.
Thanks very much, Councillor Colley. I don't think there's any amendments, but we'll just go around the table. Councillor Hannah, any amendment to this?
No amendments.
Councillor Kerr?
No amendment, Provost.
Councillor Spears?
No amendment.
Okay, then we'll just open up the debate. So, Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Provost. And my sincere thanks to Amanda for her very detailed and very clear report. I have availed myself of every briefing that's been available, and I have asked many, many questions, as Amanda will know. And I give my thanks to her and her colleagues who have brought forward this very complex report on a complex issue in a way that some of us are beginning to understand. But beyond that, one of the things that I found difficult was actually grasping that this is entirely an accounting mechanism. And I think it's important that people recognise that it is an accounting mechanism. However, I also think it's important that we recognise that the reasons why we're using it. And the reasons why we're using it is because of the underfunding of local government for a long, long period of time. And I think it's important that people actually understand that. It's deplorable that we have to use it. We know we have to use it. And I commend Amanda for having brought this forward in the way that she has. Now, as I understand it, every local authority in Scotland is using their service concession arrangements. Can I have a little clarity about the scale of the use and the range of use of service concession arrangements in other local authorities? Because I think it's important that we recognise that it is a general thing and not something specific to the Falkirk Council area. So if you can maybe just clarify a bit what the situation is across Scotland.
Ms. Temple.
Thank you, Provost. I would probably have to look back over some of the correspondence with other chief finance officers to get a sort of sense of the scale, because it's so different in different areas. In part because of, Falkirk's, the size of Falkirk's retrospective benefit is quite high. And that's partly because of the prepayment that was made, and also partly because the contracts have been running for some time. So in some other areas where their contracts are a lot newer, they won't have made such a large overpayment. So some local authorities may only have a benefit of, say, £6 million or so, and where the benefits are of a smaller magnitude like that, then they may just choose to apply it in 1 year, and that would be it. I know, I believe one of the Lanarkshires, they agreed their report. I think it was a £65 million retrospective arrangement that they were going to put into their budget over a 3-year period. So, it does vary very significantly over the piece, just depending on the scale of the contracts and the timing of the contracts. But I can try and pull some of that data together for you. I did have a look in advance of the meeting to see if there was sort of some concrete plans that I could pick up, but I can do that for you before the 1st of March.
Councillor Steinbach.
Yeah, thank you, Provost. I'll share the mention that the leader and Councillor Hannah have shared to thank Amanda and her team, but I'll try and be brief with these two questions. In 5.7.1, it says that service concession arrangements will be essential for us to meet a balanced budget for this year. I do agree with that, and I think that everybody probably across the council will as well, to maintain services. I do understand that the Scottish Government permitted this in guidance in November 2020, but feel free to correct me if I'm wrong, or perhaps it's 2021. How long was it COSLA's negotiating position that this mechanism would be essential for councils to meet a balanced budget?
Ms. Templeman.
Thank you, Provost. Thanks, Councillor Steinbank. I mean, I think this has this sort of came to the fore really during COVID. when there was some exploration of what flexibilities could be open to local governments to help support them with the pressures that they were facing. The final guidance for this came out in autumn of last year. But in the May spending review, the Scottish Government had indicated that this would be available to local authorities. So for ourselves, for example, we had started to, Danny and I had started to kind of do some calculations trying to figure out what that might look like. And we had started doing that in 2020 when the first notion that this could come out was raised. But so I think from May, certainly, and given the changes that have happened during 2022 in terms of the build-up of pressures and the build-up of inflation, I think as we got through 2022, it started to become more likely that most local authorities would be looking to try and take the benefit of service concessions as part of the 23-24 budget setting process.
Thank you. And obviously from the spending review, that's my second question. Obviously the financial position has changed several times for local government, and I believe it will have greater clarity, but it will be confirmed from the confirmation of the Scottish Government budget yesterday. Can I just understand if future year projections for the budget gap are currently still based on the flat cash settlement in the medium term financial strategy of the Scottish Government, authored by the Chair and the Cabinet Secretary for Finance?
Thanks, Councillor Stewart. Sorry, thank you, Provost. Thanks, Councillor Stewart. Yeah, to as far as I understand it, the assumption is still on a flat cash basis.
Thank you.
Councillor Spears.
Thank you. Whatever way we look at this, we are only deferring our debt to the long term. Can you give any figures on the total cost in the long term that this will cost? Because this is debt for the future. This is debt for the future generations. Future generations that already be trying to pay off student loans till they're 50 or 60. And sometimes I feel ashamed as a generation that the only generation that taxed their kids for education. Now we're taxing them for the very school they went to, and they'll have to pay for it for much longer. So we really owe it to them to tell them when this debt will be finished. They've got to plan for their future as we should plan for ours. So do we have a final date in the long term when this will actually be paid off?
Ms Templeman.
Thank you, Provost. Thanks, Councillor Spears. So the debt would be due to be repaid in 2051-52. 2051-52. So that's if you think that the NPDO contract started, the payment started roughly around 2011-12, and that's adding 40 years onto that. So in actual fact, for the NPDO, it was already a 32-year contract. So we've only added 8 years on to the end of that contract.
Well, I, for one, will apologise to future generations. You've got a long way to go to pay this off.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Spears. There's no other questions, so can we agree the report? Thank you.
Provost, apologies. I thought Councillor Nimmo was coming in, so I didn't put my light on.
So I never saw his light on. Okay.
Thank you, Provost. Just picking up on what Councillor Hannah said about Amanda's report. I thought it was the most wonderful report that I'd read. I mean, it was, I thought I'd entered the house of Slytherin, because I couldn't even believe walls were disappearing from me, floors were dropping away from me or whatever. I just couldn't get my head round about this at all. But then it all started to come together, and that is probably 95% through Amanda's input. I do have a couple of questions, Provost, if you don't mind. Page 31, 5.21, the debt repayment based on the annuity method. Why not the EIP method? What's the advantage?
Thank you. So we, all of our assets are currently repaid based on an annuity method, and most of the service concession arrangement contracts in the first place are set up in an annuity method. And again, that is designed to reflect the use of the asset to some degree, because as the asset, so you'll pay more of the debt off as the asset ages, and that reflects that there'll be more requirement to maintain and use the asset. You know, it will become more used as the asset goes on. So the annuity method is, there is a benefit to using it for this, because it means that you're paying more debt towards the end of the contract, and when we're stretching out the contract period, that helps to create a bigger retrospective adjustment. But it's also more consistent with how we would account for all our other debt and for all other capital investment.
Okay.
And that was actually one of the back and forwards that we had with our Treasury advisors and between when the guidance was getting developed, to make sure that we were considering all the available options.
Okay, thank you, Amanda. 5.35. A couple of wee questions. What's the mechanism? How do we take these options, and when do we use these options? What is the mechanism for us as a council?
Thank you. So the first thing is for council to agree to implement the revised guidance, and that will be part of the budget report on the 1st of March. Now, we've said that in paragraph 5.3.4, council can choose to pick 1, 2 or 3 or none of the options if you don't want to implement the guidance. The report in March will recommend that you select the Class 98 unitary charge and the MPDO unitary charge, and then that we come back for approval for the prepayment in 23-24. So the plan is to say, yes, we accept, we implement the guidance, and we implement it for all 3 of these areas. What the budget report on the 1st of March will then do is say, do you agree to apply a certain amount of service concessions to help get a balanced position in 23-24? So, and that's around 15 million. So at the moment, we've got £71 million that we think is a retrospective adjustment. So from the 1st of April, £71 million would go into a reserve. We would then take 15 million out of that reserve to help balance the position, and there'll be a balance that will sit in that reserve until council agrees how to apply that reserve. Now, some councils have taken a decision now on how they're going to apply it over in future years. I think from my perspective, what I've tried to emphasise with service concessions is that focus on recurring savings to balance the budget. So rather than assume the use of service concessions in future years, we need to stay focused on trying to get a recurring sustainable position, and then look at the potential need to use service concessions going forward, or the potential different ways we could use service concessions. But it would all be subject to member approval.
Okay. Thank you, Amanda. 5.53. The cost of lengthening and repayment period will potentially result in additional revenue budget pressure from year 4 onwards. Could you just expand on that a wee bit, please?
Thank you. So if you look at the table on page 40 in Appendix 1, it sets out, so if, for example, you look at the Class 98 figures, it would show that in years 2 to 5 under the current position, so we know that's 2025, payments will stop. So in theory, you would have no impact on your revenue budget after that point. But that's based on a 25-year life. We're proposing that we extend the loan over 40 years, so we extend it by a 15-year period. So that means that in years 6 to 10, for example, we're under the current arrangements, there's no impact on the revenue budget. In years 6 to 10, 11 to 25, there will be an impact in the revenue budget.
Thank you. That explains that very well. 5.62. Interest charges of £16.5 million is quite a lot of money. Is it not better to not borrow from the prepayment element, given that the whole reason for the prepayment was to avoid interest charges in the first place? That's why we put forward a prepayment.
Thank you, Provost. Thanks, Councillor McCabe.
Apologies to the Provost. I know I should be getting on you. I'm just trying to...
No, it's all right. Just trying to keep things flowing.
Thank you. So I Provost. Thank you.
I can understand the point you're making. I suppose that goes back to paragraph 5.3.5 that says we have the opportunity to take a benefit of 71 million that we can choose to use or not use, and we can choose how to apply. And if we got to a financially sustainable position, we could choose to reinvest in other areas. So there could be real benefits from doing it. If we were sitting comfortably thinking, well, we're in a financially sustainable position, we have clear recurring savings that will balance our position, and actually we're quite comfortable just to take £50 million of a retrospective adjustment and invest that how we see fit. I think that's quite a different discussion from where we are. So at the moment where we are is that we have a significant financial gap still, even if members were to take all of the savings that have been put forward by officers and agree significant council tax increases, we would still have a £20 million gap, £21.5 million gap over the next 4-year period. So I think at this point, officers' view is that given that uncertainty and given the challenge that the council's facing, that it's more prudent to take all the benefits, have them in reserve, and choose when and how we apply them.
No, I think that's wonderful, Amanda. I think that was very beneficial to all of the elected members just to hear what you said there. I don't really have any more. I'm quite sure Amanda will be delighted here. I don't have any more questions. I've just got a couple of wee observation comments. 5.73 and 5.74, even with the redesign and savings that we're talking about, I don't think we're ever going to be able to deliver services on an annual basis. I genuinely, maybe I've got my doom and gloom hat on, I believe that identification of recurring savings is unachievable. So I buy into what you're saying. We do need these service concessions to be maximised, but we shouldn't be relying on it. We shouldn't be, it's not the way that we should be driving council services. 5.74, the drive for future investment following deployment of the SCAs is laudable. I hope that it comes to pass, but I genuinely fear for the financial cliff edge that's mentioned. And at that cheery note, I'll just pass over to the Provost. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks very much, Councillor McCabe. We'll go for a final comment to Councillor Redmond. If you could be as brief as possible, please.
Cheers, thanks. Just in 5.7.6, if we did use that full £71 million and we had to pay it, as Councillor Spears was mentioning, over 28 years, how much interest would we pay over that 28 years? Would you know that figure?
Councillor Redmond, thanks. I don't have that figure in front of me. but I can model that out and work it out. As I think we've said for the 50 million, so we know it would be 16.5 million for the 21 million element. The interest for the other elements is a little bit difficult. Well, I should say we know. I'm saying we know it'll be 16.5 million, but that could change depending on the prevailing interest rates. In terms of the remaining 50 million, it really depends on what our council's cash flow is looking like that determines the extent to which we would need to borrow at all. We may have enough cash balances that we can manage that internally and we wouldn't have to borrow, or we may have not have enough cash balances to do that and we'd have to borrow. And then we'd have to decide if we were borrowing on a long-term basis or a short-term basis, and that would depend on what the interest rates were doing. So that's why I had just put an example in paragraph 5.6.4 about, you know, if you were borrowing 10 million and you decided to take it with short-term borrowing, based on the base rate, that 10 million would cost about £450,000 to borrow. So the unitary charge element is a little bit different because we don't have to take a loan in the way that we do with the prepayment element. It may well be that we wouldn't have to borrow for it and we could use our cash balances for it. So it's a little bit trickier to model, but I can have a look at that.
Thanks.
Sorry.
Okay, thanks, Councillor Redmond. We're coming up to nearly 3 hours. We've got a couple of items to go, and I know some members need to have something to eat for medical conditions. So I just wondered what is the feeling in the room? Do we want to continue with these 2 items or break for lunch?
I think we should continue, Provost. The items, one's for noting and the other one should be relatively short, I think.
Carry on.
Break for lunch. I know there's some people with medical conditions who maybe don't want to say at the moment, but.
So, what's the feeling?
I think there's a number of people with other meetings later this afternoon, so I think if we could continue and finish the meeting, people could perhaps be relatively.
There's a majority for continuing. Looks like it. Okay, we'll continue, and if members need to go and get some.
Provost, I'm sorry, but individual medical conditions really need to be taken into account. They should take precedent over anything else.
Provost, can I add, forgoing exactly what's been said by the 2 councillors, the suggestion that this will only take a couple of minutes and we'll have finished. As a council here, we're here to debate, we're here to discuss. We take us however long it takes.
Okay, so I'd just like to ask again, is the majority for continuing? Agreed?
Provost, people's medical conditions shouldn't be determined by a majority vote in this chamber.
Well, that's a decision of the chamber, I'm afraid. So, has it got Councillor Bundy?
Provost, sorry, it's Councillor Ritchie here.
Councillor Ritchie.
How do we actually know who's agreeing and who's not agreeing to it? Because all I'm seeing with being online is agreed with some people and other people not saying anything at all. So,
all right, well, Mr. Moody, do you want to come?
Yeah, I think, Provost, you were trying to determine the issue, but just a sense of was the room in general agreement with that proposition? You'd asked the question and there was a general, I think, acclamation of agreement to continue. I think Councillor Ritchie makes a reasonable point that perhaps we couldn't hear what people were thinking about it from the online. So maybe we can try briefly again to say, is there general agreement that the council continue with the remaining 2 items?
No.
Provost, I'm not agreeing to that. I'm one of the individuals that has a medical condition. I need to take a break at 1 o'clock to check my bloods and also have something to eat.
Okay, well, it seems that there isn't general agreement overall, so I think taking that into account, I think we'll just break for lunch. Consultation under the Community Empowerment Act 2015 for disposal of common good land, and it's pages 41 to 96 in your agendas, and it's Mr. Kettrick is speaking to this report.
Thank you, Provost. The purpose of the report is to provide Council with an update on the outcome of the recent public consultation that sought views on the proposed acceleration of the demolition of Falkirk Town Hall. Members will recollect that in September 22, Council agreed that the segregation and retention of Falkirk Town Hall from the former municipal buildings was unviable due to the costs involved. This consultation was considered required as the property is held as a common good asset, and therefore decisions on matters such as disposal and demolitions require a community consultation to be undertaken. This was considered appropriate. The consultation is outlined in the report and was undertaken in accordance with the statutory requirements, which included site notices and advertising to encourage responses. 369 responses were received, with 173, which is 47%, agreeing to the acceleration, 192, which is 52%, disagreeing to the acceleration, and 4%, that's which is 1%, expressing no view. Of the 192 disagreeing, 41 sought to keep Falkirk Town Hall open and not close it, and 40 advising that it should remain open until the new facility is available. These together represent approximately 42% of those disagreeing to the acceleration of the demolition, and as basing their views on Falkirk Town Hall remaining open, which the previous decision considered unviable, could be considered as not technically or not directly related to the question asked. A summary of the feedback is outlined in sections 5.7 and 5.8 of the report, and individual comments and the proposed responses are detailed in Appendix 2. Despite the slight majority disagreeing to the acceleration, the recommendation is, however, to continue with the acceleration of the demolition, reflecting that the proposition of keeping Falkirk Town open is considered unviable, and the building, if not demolished, will present a number of risks that are outlined in section 8.4. In conclusion, Provost, whilst the Council requires to have regard to the consultation, we must be mindful of the costs and the challenges of retaining the building. And in light of these risks, it is recommended that the Council progress the acceleration of the demolition with immediate effect, and I'm happy to take any questions, Provost.
Thanks very much, Mr. Kettrick. Councillor Meikle-John.
Thank you, Mr. Kettrick. Kind of caught me out of guard there, being so brief in yours. But yeah, you have taken, obviously, the paper as read. Consultation followed the decision on the closure of a town hall, and the consultation was on the acceleration of the demolition of the building. We were hugely disappointed that the decision to close the town hall had to be taken before a new facility was in place. The costs associated with decoupling the town hall from the municipal buildings and reinstatement were far more significant than originally expected, and would not have been the best use of public money under the best value. It would also have required the building to have closed for at least a year to allow any works to be carried out. Disentanglement was estimated at 2.3 million immediately, with a further over 600,000 for immediate repairs, and then potentially 3 million of repairs and improvements to keep the building operational for 3 to 5 years while a new facility was constructed. These costs would likely increase during time, and was considered not best value, and would not have come and would have had to have come from the capital allocation that was earmarked for the delivery of the new town hall. The added complication following the decision on the early closure being the failure of the heating system at a critical time, causing disruption to performances and compromising the comfort of both the performers and the audiences, as well as incurring additional costs for the hire of temporary generators to enable the agreed programme to be concluded. This is a very stark reminder that we have buildings at the end of life, that we need to manage planned closures to prevent further situations such as this. And not doing that and planning, however, is difficult for communities, makes it difficult for communities and creates a huge risk to the council. Just a little bit of context that since the decision to close the property was made, the heating has failed, requiring a temporary installation to be made of a boiler for £46,000 for 3 months. That's now been removed. In order to support the community arts programme across the district, equipment and furniture has now been reutilised elsewhere, supporting Grangemouth and Bowness town halls. And community groups have had the opportunity to take further items of furniture away to benefit the local communities and indeed enhance the arts programme. However, the report is not about the closure, but it provides an update on the outcome of the recent consultation on the accelerated demolition of the town hall. Reports required because the property is in the common good, and therefore decisions about its future requires community consultation, just as we had for other properties such as Kilns House and municipal buildings. On that basis, the previous decisions on the site being disposed was based on the new Falkirk Town Hall being available. And I've already made comment on the reasons for the early closure, which is subject of a previous decision of council. Therefore, the acceleration of the demolition is a change to that previous decision. Consultation, has outlined in the report, was carried out in accordance with the statutory requirements, and all of the public notices and advertising was done to encourage responses. However, we recognise that there were a relatively low number of responses, and we have seen examples of that in the past where many were non one way or another around the decision that was made. As Mr Kettrick has highlighted, the 369 responses received, 47% agreeing to the acceleration and 52% disagreeing, and a small percentage of 1% expressing no view. Putting it into context, of the 52 disagreeing, 81 expressed a view on the closure of the town hall, which was not the purpose of the consultation. There are a number of risks associated with not progressing the demolition of the town hall, such as increased costs for rates, security to prevent unauthorised access and vandalism, including the inability to market the site in full and secure a capital receipt. But we provide a contribution towards the delivery of a new town hall facility. We do, however, have a demolition contractor that is able to mobilise depending on today's decision, and that would incur best value because of already being on site. While all comments have been acknowledged in the consultation and understand the view expressed at the early closure, before a new facility is in place, it should be noted that the work is ongoing to identify a site for the new build, and a report will be brought back to update members next month. On balance, with the risks associated with maintaining the site, there is no benefit to not going ahead with the accelerated demolition. Therefore, we support the officer's recommendation, and despite of the slight majority disagreeing to the acceleration of the demolition, that works are progressed, reflecting that a large proportion of these were objecting on the basis of keeping the Falkirk Town Hall open. Happy to support the report. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks very much, Councillor Meikle. John, do you have a seconder?
Councillor Garner.
Councillor Garner.
Thanks, Provost. As always, covered fully with the council leader, clearly and eloquently. I'm happy to second.
Thanks very much, Councillor Garner. I'll now go to Councillor Hannah and ask if you've got an amendment.
No amendment.
Thank you. Councillor Kerr?
No amendment, Provost.
Councillor Spears?
I have no amendment to the consultation, but I do have comment.
Thank you very much. We'll now open up for discussion. Councillor Spears?
Since this is not about the closure of the town hall, it's already been taken. It's about the consultation. The consultation proved that the majority disagreed with the decision to go ahead with early closure. So, as a democratic body, one, why are we not agreeing with the democratic decision of the consultation under the rules of the Falkirk Common Good Fund on the demolition of Falkirk Town Hall? It leads to questions. Why consult? Why not act on that consultation? We're in the middle of an asset realisation programme. There's big issues going to come, and it's going to be subject to consultation. I say to people like the closure of the sports complex in Bowness. Various closures, I believe there's 133 different properties. are we going to go along with that consultation? Because the people disagree, are we going to ignore them? This is not about the closure of the town hall, it's about consultation, and it's about public trust. If we're going to consult, we need to act on that consultation. I believe most people were party to the briefing we got earlier in the week regarding about communities working together, about council and communities working with each other, about consultation and contact. That happens to be my byword, and I use it every election. It is about consultation and contact. But if you don't act on that consultation, then why is it there? So my concern is about public trust here. Are we going to lose public trust because we're not listening to the consultation that they're giving us?
Yeah, thanks very much, Councillor Spears.
Provost.
Sorry. Hello, is that Councillor McCann?
Yeah, fine, thank you very much. Obviously, I'm a lone voice in the wilderness.
Yeah, Councillor McCann, could I just
can
go
you
to
hear
Mr.
me
Kettrick?
okay?
Aye, could I just go to Mr. Kettrick to respond to
Certainly.
Councillor Spears first?
Certainly, thank you.
It was just on the consultation figures, the higher figure and the lower figure. I think Councillor Meikle-John touched on it. Could you maybe just go over that again?
Thank you, Provost. The purpose of the consultation was specifically on the question, do you agree or disagree with the acceleration of the demolition of the town hall? It wasn't a question of whether the town hall was to remain open or not. The consequence of not accelerating the town hall are highlighted in the report and will lead to a building being left there, which would be a security risk, potentially attracting vandalism. We would have the costs associated with it. It would also delay the demolition and the preparation of the site for future disposal. So they were identified as risks associated. And when analysing the majority, the 52%, it was identified within there that there was approximately 42% of those. Their basis for disagreeing to the acceleration was on the basis of the views that Falkirk Town Hall would remain open, or it would remain open until a new facility was available. Now, whilst they haven't been discounted, they have to be recognised as part of the consultation.
Thanks, Mr. Kettrick. Councillor McCann.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me okay, Provost?
Loud and clear.
Fine, thank you. Now, this is the first opportunity because of the illness that I had to speak on the town hall situation and the future. Obviously, it's been highlighted. What we're really here for is in relation to the progress of the demolition. The issue quite clearly, Provost, is that I'm probably the only councillor over the years that's ever hired the town hall myself. And I did that the last time was in November, when I had a major event for the community. Now, there was nearly 500 people there. Every single person that came through that door had stated quite clearly that could not believe that Falkirk Council was going to demolish that hall. They couldn't believe it. That was after weeks and weeks and weeks of media hype in relation to the groups and organisations that are left stranded because of the fact they haven't got a facility and there's nothing in place. Or as it used to be kept saying in this area, there is no plan B. Provost, we just got to go back to the fact is that obviously I was in your position just before you took over at the last election. And the fact of the matter is we've been put out of the municipal buildings over 2 years ago. And yet we're in a situation now where I'm looking at all yous that's in the foundry. You're all squashed together there on one long table like the Last Supper, because of the fact is that even after 2.5 years, we still haven't managed to get a room or a facility that would be big enough to take council meetings.
Provost, this isn't related to the report. I'm
well,
sorry.
okay. Well, the fact of the matter is, it's just the record that you have. The fact of the matter is, I'm making an amendment here that Councillor Spears is quite right. What we're going here with the community and the terms of the consultation. Whether it was hundreds or thousands more, then it's still the fact is that the majority of the people that he's contacted I knew to 100, nearly 170,000. I think about 500 or 600, it isn't much. But I can tell you that every single person that was in that town hall, along aside my event in November, just a few months ago, would have voted to keep that town hall open.
Provost, I have to say, this is not the subject of the report in front of us today. I'm sorry that this is not relevant.
No, you don't like hearing. You don't like hearing the truth. So the fact
have you got your amendment?
Yes, my amendment's quite clear. Is that the council does not progress the demolition of the town hall in relation to the work that's been done in terms of the consultation exercise, which clearly showed that the majority of the people in this community do not support that. And until we have another area that's going to ensure that our communities and all the groups and organisations have an opportunity for the arts and civic, then we keep that open, and if we've got to spend money in it, so be it. So that's my amendment. Thank you.
We'll just go over to Mr. Moody's now.
Thank you, Provost. And I think it's worth just recalling the subject matter of the report is on the question of accelerating the demolition of the town hall. The question before the council is not opening or closing the facility of the town hall. That decision was made, I think, as Councillor Buchanan observes, at the September meeting of council. So the question is in recommendation 3 of the report, with the recommendation being in relation to question 1 to agree to proceed with the demolition as soon as practicable after the closure. As I understand Councillor Buchanan's proposed amendment is simply to say agree not to proceed with the demolition. But I think it's important that the council understands that were that to be agreed, it wouldn't reopen the town hall. It would leave an empty town hall becoming derelict on the site. And Mr. Kedrick may be better placed again to explain what the risks might be associated with that.
Okay, Mr. Kedrick.
Thank you, Provost. Well, we've highlighted the main risks within the report, particularly at section 8.4. There will be an additional capital cost for the implications in structurally separating the municipal buildings from the town hall, or we leave both parts of the building in situ. Recognising that construction costs are increasing, so there will still be a future additional capital cost, which at this stage we would be unable to determine. There will be an ongoing revenue cost implication of holding the retained closed Falkirk Town Hall in terms of rates and in terms of security. We couldn't leave a building there that's got a fairly large glass frontage and contains asbestos without being unattended. The building will generally become a further eyesore and may attract antisocial behaviour because it will be vacant, and that could represent a risk, and it would also delay the marketing and disposal of the municipal building site and the potential for generating a capital receipt. But that's a lesser risk at this stage because we're still some way off from progressing that.
Okay, thanks, Mr. Kedrick. Can I ask if you've got a seconder for your amendment, Councillor Buchanan?
Well, I don't know. I'm a one-man band, as you know, Provost, so I don't know if anybody that's listening to this today would support my amendment. I've not been in contact with anybody regarding it.
Okay, thank you. Do we have a seconder for Councillor Buchanan's amendment? No. Okay, so the amendment falls, Councillor Buchanan.
Fine, thank you, sir.
Thank you. We'll now go to Councillor Hannah.
Thank you, Provost. I have to say, I mean, I have every sympathy with Councillor Buchanan's comments and his views on this. I think we know that at the time there was a lot of concern about the closure of the town hall. There's still a lot of concern about the closure of the town hall. The public said it was wrong. We tried to put a stop to it, but the reality is the decision is made. And we have to start to move forward. I do think what we should learn from this, though, is the importance of consulting before making a decision, rather than making a decision and then consulting on a very narrow area of the issue. Can I just have some clarity, please, as to the closure of the town hall, because the recommendation says that we should proceed with demolition as soon as practical after its closure. My understanding was that it has been closed. So could you please clarify that?
The building, to in all respects in terms of activities associated with the arts, is closed. There is still a couple of staff there in the process of demobilising the building. That process is expected to end in the next few days.
Any further questions, Councillor Hannah? No?
No, thank you.
We'll go to Councillor Bundy next.
Thank you, Provost. And what has been highlighted in this debate is that this is not a discussion about reopening the town hall. It is about the building itself, and should we keep the building standing or should we accelerate its demolishing? But one of the words that kept appearing in the consultation was that the building was unattractive, and I don't think an unattractive building is something that we want to keep standing. Attraction derives from the Latin to be drawn, and why would we want to keep a building up which stops people being drawn to the Falkirk area? And that's why I'll be supporting accelerating the demolition. But there is a lesson to be learned here as we go forward. We know that the new Falkirk Town Hall will be constructed on the High Street. We don't know the exact location, but it will be on the High Street. And it's vitally important that we build a building, a town hall, which is attractive. And that means building a town hall which complements the most attractive buildings on the High Street, those being Falkirk Trinity Church and the steeple. Describing the beauty of old European cities, political philosopher Sir Roger Scruton says that they do not come from an imposition of some overall proportional outline, but the organic growth of a street from the repetition of matching details. End of quote. And that's what we should be doing. We should be building a town hall which adds harmony to the High Street, not one that overwhelms the existing architecture, undermining the atmosphere that we also want to conserve. And that is a very important lesson. During the strategic property review, we've heard the passion of keeping Grangemouth Town Hall, Bowness Town Hall, the Dobie Hall. They're buildings that people describe as attractive. We've knocked down a building which people are going to be knocking down a building that people describe as unattractive. Maybe that's a lesson that we should keep in mind for the future. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bundy. We'll now go to Councillor Patterson.
Thanks, Provost. Just a couple comments off the back of what Councillor Bundy was saying. Apologies, my cat has no personal boundaries. Two things. Whether or not a building is attractive is really subjective. Thank you for the talk on it and the history of what the word means, but it is subjective. And also, has there been new information that I've not been aware of that the new town hall is going to be on the High Street? Has that been confirmed?
Mr. Kitrick.
Part of the previous report identified that it was to be a high street location. In terms of high street, the reference was more in reference to the centre of the town centre in that context of the high street.
Yeah, sorry, that was my understanding. Just when it was stated, I thought that perhaps there was something I'd missed, but thank you for the clarification. In terms of the consultation that we've just heard, I think it's fair to say that if we were really listening to our residents, the town hall wouldn't have been closed without plans in place for its replacement. We are where we are, but the low level of responses to this consultation is really quite unsurprising. The people of Falkirk are absolutely scunnered filling out consultations on what services they're going to lose next, and especially at a time when our families have all got enough to contend with. And it's not just an issue for the arts. You just need to look at the comments section of the Falkirk Herald to see the level of frustration felt by all of our constituents. Political decision making's led us to this point where our residents are feeling disappointed and they're now facing a demolition of the town hall with still no feasible alternatives in place. My fear is that we're going to risk alienating our constituents further as although discussions are taking place here today, very much it's going to be the public perception that we're giving zero heed to the responses to this consultation. And again, expecting our constituents to engage on different things, and we really should be striving for higher engagement. I think it's a real risk that we're going to alienate people further with this.
Okay, thanks for your comments, Councillor Patterson. We'll now go to Councillor Nimmo.
Thanks, Provost. It's just a question for officers. There's obviously a continuing underlying problem regarding consultation exercises that Falkirk Council undertake. Going by the number, or the very small number of responses received, 369 responses out of a Falkirk population of 157,000 people. That's a very poor response by any manner of means. I'd be interested to hear what officers have to say with regard to how they're going to maximise future consultation returns, because we obviously can't continue with this, the low return rates that we've been getting. Just in relation to the recommendations at 2.11 and 2, it's asking us to note the consultation processes. Perhaps the first two parts should be reworded and asked to note the very poor consultation responses, because that's what they are. It's not just a play on words, it's fact. Thanks, Provost.
Okay, I don't know if anybody would like to comment on the consultation and how we, Mr. Laurie.
Yes, thank you, Provost, and thanks to Councillor Nimmo. My own view is it's perhaps unsurprising that the level of response to this consultation was low, because it was actually a very technical response. There was a session which Kenny Gillespie led on Monday, talking about the kind of resources we're now putting into our consultation, how joined up we are in doing that. And I suppose there were two examples that particularly came to mind. One is the strategic property review itself, and we're reporting back on that at the end of March, and there has been a huge amount of response to that. I think the figure in the region of 3,000 online and hundreds of people attending sessions. So people feel strongly about that and they want to get engaged. Whereas on this particular consultation, it was very much a technical common good consultation. And I suppose the other thing is this is perhaps worth mentioning, is the community choices programme. And again, I don't have numbers to hand. Kenny Gillespie was here to be able to tell us, but there's been an enormous response to the latest round of community choices, and that information will come back to members in due course. So it is, I think, partly about the nature of the consultation. This particular consultation didn't really lend itself, or wasn't likely to generate a large response. But it's also that broader work that Kenny and his colleagues are doing to try and improve and engender strong relationships with communities. Some good work being done there. And for those of you that weren't able to attend the session on Monday, I'm sure that the slides and information can be shared more widely. Thank you, Provost.
Thank you, Mr. Laurie. We'll now go to Councillor Steenbank.
Thank you, Provost. I'll try and keep this brief. I acknowledge the points I think everybody's made from all the different political groups. I'm going to try and cut through and ask a question to Mr. Kettrick at the end, which hopefully will help towards certainty, which is now what a lot of these arts, theatre and other groups want from their council. Councillor Buchanan's event that he mentioned on Remembrance Day was fantastic, as well as many of the other events in the last few months of the lifetime of the Falkirk Town Hall. I think a lot of that is showing that it's imperative that we do bring forward plans to meet that demand and that certainty for a new facility. So my question to Mr. Kettrick or any of the other officers is to ask if there's been a decision on a preferred site yet, and the date in which proposals will be brought back before council. Thank you.
Mr. Kettrick.
Thank you, Provost. We've highlighted where we are at section 6 of the report. We had a call for sites which closed on the 3rd of February, and colleagues are currently evaluating those sites that have been put forward. A report on this is expected to come on the 29th of March. What I will say is that is subject to the progress we make with the negotiations with the owners of the sites, because clearly we wouldn't want to bring back something here that was either incomplete or could prejudice those commercial negotiations. And that's the intention, as we hope to be back on the 29th of March for an update.
Thank you.
Mr. Cartwright. Is that you finished, Councillor Steinbach?
Yes, thank you, Provost.
Thank you. Councillor Redmond.
Thanks, Provost. Just reading through the comments, and also Councillor Bundy's a bit right. Some people did say the building was a bit of an eyesore, but there was a lot of really positive stories about the building as well and what it meant to people. And I attended Councillor Buchanan's remembrance event as well, and it was good to have a place where everybody could come together. So many local acts and bands could come, and we could see them play. And there was old people there, young people there, all different political parties, and it was a place that really brought people together. And that's what we've lost. It doesn't matter if it was a very pleasant building. I know we've lost the place that brought people together. So I think that's just worthwhile noticing. And some of the, on page 65, somebody's saying, I would like further consultation on the replacement. So it's a wee bit like, how do we go forward with this? And how do we involve the public in our next town hall? And what's it going to be? What size do we want it? What is it that people of Falkirk need? And then talking about the actual site of the former town hall itself, what are we going to do to that? Are we just going to sell it for new build houses, or could we maybe encourage a hotel there or something? Page 57, somebody's actually said, I want a local international airport in its place. I don't think that's I don't really see that working very well, but going forward, could we use this site as an overall plan for the development of Falkirk for that hotel? Could it encourage tourists to come in, use the high street, use our new town hall? I just think it'd be good to have not just a consultation about Falkirk Town, the new Falkirk Town Hall, but a consultation about the whole of Falkirk Town Centre and how we bring it forward and encourage tourism and encourage people to come in and use it so that it's a flourishing and thriving place. So that's all I've got to say. Thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Redmond. Mr. Cartwright, would you like to maybe perhaps touch on the master plan? Or
Thank you, Provost. There has been a number of engagement exercises with businesses and community over the years, and culminating in there is now a piece of work that's been undertaken to produce a town centre or an updated town centre master plan on the uses that would come into the town. In effect, a repurposing of town centres, something that a lot of local authorities are going through a similar exercise with the demise of retail or big retail. And that process is ongoing, and clearly our part in that is through the Falkirk Town Hall development. In terms of the existing site, we have done work and we've had it evaluated. The highest value we can achieve would be through residential, and that would be complementary to the emerging master plan, where the focus of the commercial activity would be around the town centre, the core of the town centre, to try and regenerate that. There will be a report coming back to elected members on that master plan with the findings, which includes consideration of the aspects from businesses and the communities. So, that's kind of where we are. And, the key part of that regeneration strategy will be this iconic building. And I say iconic because it will be the new town hall as the centre, and it will act as the catalyst for wider regeneration.
Councillor Redmond, is that a good answer for you?
That's great, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Councillor McCabe.
Thank you, Provost. Before I start, can I point out that part of the consultation document, page 51, the hyperlink doesn't work. Page 52, the hyperlink doesn't work. When we put out consultations like this, I would hope that things like that would have maybe been looked at beforehand. On the 30th of September 2020, the Council agreed to decommission the municipal buildings. At the same time, options for a new HQ and arts facility were to be progressed. The Town Hall, constructed in 1965, was a multi-purpose arts centre used for civic events and entertainment purposes. On the 23rd of June 2021, the Council considered potential sites for a new HQ and arts facility. No decision was taken, and a statutory public consultation was agreed. The consultation sought opinions on the demolition of the municipal buildings, with exception of the town hall, plant room and other shared facilities, and the sale of a site. The consultation was required as the buildings and site form part of the common good of the former borough of Falkirk. Public consultation commenced on the 1st of July 2021. As part of the consultation, the existing town hall, as well as the plant room, would remain until a new town hall facility was built. A majority agreed that the municipal buildings, with exception of the plant room and town hall, should be demolished. One of the options under consideration included part of the site for a new HQ. As part of that consultation, it was advised that the town hall would remain operational until a new replacement was constructed, anticipated around 2024 to 25. On the 8th of December 2021, consideration was given to refurbishment of a town hall, reflecting updated costs of repairs and energy efficiency targets. The design team concluded costs would be costly and disruptive, and at its meeting on the 28th of September 2022, the council decided it was not best value and closure of the facility should be accelerated, subject to an updated consultation on the demolition under the Community Empowerment Act, what we're talking about. The Falkirk Town Hall site forms part of the common good of the former borough of Falkirk. Coming to the critical part, consultation, what it actually means. Consultation, the action or process of formally consulting or discussing. As such, this particular action or process has proven utterly pointless unless the outcome arrived at was the specific outcome intended, i.e. the ticking of a box for compliance purposes. We simply asked the wrong question. This was never about accelerating the demolition of a town hall. We hadn't identified a specific date for the demolition. This was all about avoiding the question, do you accept Falkirk Council's intention to demolish the existing town hall prior to construction of a replacement facility? Genuine consultation where our communities and residents' views are respected and valued is what we should be looking for. To ask a pointless question which made absolutely no difference to the council's decision or plans is damaging to the reputation of this council. Already at a depressingly low level, the public's perception of the council's attitude to consultation is only amplified in the responses detailed within the report. Councillor Patterson has already alluded to this. The consultation analysis. 369 responses, 248 opinions. It's admitted in the report that a substantial number of comments did not relate, quote, directly to the consultation question. That's damning. If you ask a question and you're getting different responses, it gives you an insight into it. 52% disagreed to the early demolition. To what avail? None. It meant nothing. 192 responses disagreed with the acceleration, and no amount of fudging can hide the fact that the acceleration and the closure or early closure before a replacement was built was not the preferred choice.
Councillor McCabe, you've had 4 minutes, Saunders. Have you got a question in there somewhere?
I do have a couple of questions. I'll miss it, all of the other points I was making, Provost. I'm trying to get across here. We're looking at consultation and we're not taking cognizance of it. The question was to do, falls under the Community Empowerment Act, Section 8, number 104. We've just ignored that. The defining opinion of the public is stated very clearly. A large proportion of the responses disagreeing with accelerating the demolition focus on the retention or refurbishment of the Falkirk Town Hall. That says it all. That says it all. My question, I've got every sympathy with Councillor Buchanan's amendment. Couldn't support it because we have to close, we have to demolish the town hall. Question is 3.1. What's the estimated level of carbon emissions of the site once it's been fully repurposed? I'm sorry, did I miss the joke there?
Carry on, Councillor McCabe.
I'm surprised you've been allowed to speak.
I asked a question there and it was met with a wee bit of hilarity. And I just didn't quite grasp it. I'll ask the question again, Provost. What's the estimated level of carbon emissions of the site once it has been fully repurposed?
Mr. Kirkpatrick.
I'm not quite sure in terms of Provost what is meant by repurposing of the site. If it is subsequent to the demolition, I can certainly get colleagues to calculate that information. It's not something I would have on hand.
No, it's not. It's not that, Mr. Ketty. The point I'm driving at is we've got a clear site. Well, then, so we've got rid of our carbon emission numbers, and then we're flogging the site, and we're going to have houses in there, roads and cars and whatever. I was just wondering, has there been any evaluation done on what the carbon emissions are of a development site like that size?
At this stage, Provost, there has been no calculation by us of what any redevelopment proposal would be of the site, and that would be something that would be considered as any proposals for the development of the site were brought forward by a private enterprise, a private company or a private individual, and that would form part of the planning process.
Yeah, I appreciate that, Mr. Ketty. It's just the fact that, we're getting rid of our emissions, but we're replacing it with somebody else's emissions. That was my only point. Thanks, Provost, for your indulgence. Appreciate it.
Thanks very much, Councillor McCabe. I don't see any other hands up.
Can I sum up, Provost?
And so no amendments, so a brief summing up from Councillor Meikle-John.
It will be very brief, and listening to members' discussions around here, just very, very briefly in relation to a replacement town hall. It was within members' hands. It was within members' hands 2 years ago to be able to progress that. It was in members' hands just over a year ago as well to be able to progress that. But decisions were made democratically at that time. So that's where we now are. Having had the consultation and recognising that there was a statutory obligation of what questions we had to ask, the responses that came back, many of which were not related directly to the question that was asked, but acknowledging that people's views and on balance the huge liability of not demolishing the existing town hall would leave to the council, that on balance that's what's before us in the report, and we are at liberty as a council to be able to do that, recognising the huge risks that would then have been left if we had a derelict building to sit on a site and be able to have to manage that. So that's why I think there's justification based on the margins that we can approve the accelerated demolition of the existing town hall and celebrate and acknowledge the work that's been done in identifying a site and taking forward a replacement town hall. Thank you, Provost.
Okay, thanks very much, Councillor Meikle-John. Can we agree?
Provost, just
Councillor Meikle-John summed up, so
it's a technical point, a point of procedure, if you like, Provost.
The debate's closed, Councillor McCabe.
So there's a point of clarification.
Yeah.
Provost.
We've agreed, Councillor McCabe, so we've got to move on.
It's just the fact, I'll explain it to the Provost and then. The consultation comments have been anonymised and proposed responses are set out. So it's proposed responses.
Yeah, will you stop trying to heckle? Just, I'll chair the meeting. I'll chair the meeting, but just don't heckle for the sideline. No, well, I'll chair the meeting.
There are proposed responses.
Councillor McCabe, we've closed the debate.
It's not a debate, Provost.
We've closed the debate though, so we're moving on to the next agenda item, if you don't mind. So can we agree the report? Okay, thank you. Next item of business, agenda item 7, review of committee structure and appointments. It's a report by Director of Transformation, Communities and Corporate Services, and Mr. Moody will summarise the report and recommendations. Thank you.
Yes, thank you very much, Provost. And this report, I suppose, it comes in two parts. The first part relates to the review or proposed review of committee structures and standing orders. And the principal ask of the Council in relation to that issue is to agree to establish a working group to work with me in reviewing your decision-making structures. The aim is to report back to Council in September. I think conscious that that might be ambitious depending on the depth of the discussions involved to have a backstop date of the December Council if that's necessary. The proposal for the working group is one from each of the main groups, one member from each of the main groups and one independent too. The reason for reviewing the committee structure at this stage is that it's broadly been in place in its large shape just now for about 10 years. And that appears to me to be a reasonable time to ask ourselves the question, is it the right structure for us at this time? Are there changes to be made to it? Are there better ways of doing our business as a council? On the second part of the report, we have two appointments which are before you as a council. One relates to the appointment of the convener of the Scrutiny Committee, which was previously held by Councillor McCabe. And the second is the appointment of two members to the Falkirk Temperance Trust. Those members required to be drawn from the old Falkirk Burgle area, and there is some information on the purpose of the trust contained at paragraph 6.2 of the report. Thank you, Provost.
Thanks very much, Mr Moody. We'll now go to Councillor Meikle-John to speak to our motion.
Thank you, Provost. As Mr Moody said, it's good practice to look to review decision-making processes and indeed to ensure that it remains fit for purpose and relevant to the current working climate. It has been 10 years since the last review was carried out. I remember that process well, as will Colin, because it was very protracted. But it did give us an opportunity to streamline the processes while retaining the scrutiny of the decision making. That's not to say that things could not further improved, and therefore there's been an opportunity, and there's also been a number of revisions to the standing orders over the last few years. By carrying out this review, will enable us to tidy these things up, perhaps simplify some of the language, and to look at whether or not the current structure we've got is still relevant and fit for purpose in the current climate. Therefore, I'm happy to move the paper recommending that the establishment of a working group comprising of a representation from each of the political groups and an independent. This would be considered a short-term working group and would expect again to report to Council, as Mr Moody said, in September, although recognising that that work will be competing with other areas of work. A backstop of having December as an option seems reasonable. In relation to the appointments of scrutiny convener, that's with the opposition members, and I understand that there is a nomination coming forward. I also understand that both Labour and Conservative groups have nominations for the Temperance Trust. However, if necessary, my group are prepared to put forward nominations if required. In the interest of brevity, I'll move the report. Provost.
Thanks very much, Councillor Meikle-John. Do you get a seconder?
Thanks, Provost. Happy to second.
Thanks, Councillor Garner. We'll now go to Councillor Hannah.
Thank you. I'm not quite sure. I don't have an amendment, but do you just want me to speak now?
Aye, but maybe your nominations.
Right. Well, first of all, I'd like to welcome this report. I think it's in some respects overdue. I'd also like to welcome the nature of it in its brevity and in the fact that it's very concise. It's one of the many issues that I have been raising outside of meetings with officers about the way in which we do our business. 10 years ago, when the current structure was set up, we would not have had, was it 10 councillors attending the meeting on Teams. A great many other changes have happened in the last 10 years, and a great many more will happen in the next 10 years. So I think it's important that we do this. So I welcome the opportunity and will be happy to contribute to the group. On the question of the convener of scrutiny, I'd like to say I'm very sorry that the previous convener of scrutiny resigned. And in the absence of any other suggestions, I was going to propose Councillor Bissett as the convener of scrutiny. In relation to the members of the Falkirk Temperance Trust, my plan is to propose Councillor Ewan Steenbank to be the member of that.
Thanks, Councillor Hannah. Now go to Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Convener. No amendments. I'd just like to concur with the sentiments of Councillor Hannah and thank Councillor McKee for the work that he done when he was in that post. We have now got a nomination for the scrutiny, but we would like to put forward Councillor Patrick as a member of the either South or North wards in Falkirk as part of the team for the Temperance Trust. And as everybody else, we will allocate somebody to the committee for the working group. Thanks, Convener.
Thanks very much, Councillor Kerr. Councillor Spears.
No amendment.
Mr Moody.
Okay, I think then the council is agreed to establish the working group in the terms described, and in relation to the appointment of the convener of the scrutiny committee, there's one nomination only, and that's yourself, Provost. There'll be no other nominations. You're appointed as convener of the committee, and we have Councillors Steenbank and Patrick appointed as the two members of the Temperance Trust. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Mr Moody. I'd just like to thank Councillor McCabe for his diligence in chairing the scrutiny committee. It was very forensic, and still look forward to working with him because he's still on the scrutiny committee. So thanks for that. And thanks everyone for their attendance and their patience, and hope the rest of your day goes very well. Thank you.